All right, hello, and we are back. So today's topic, as you would have read already, is prophecies, philosophical framework. What happened earlier, probably in one of our videos, that a few of the guys had commented that they were not really clear why the criteria for fulfilling a prophecy has to be the way it has to be. So what we decided was it was time that we laid out the criteria properly in front of everybody to understand why that criteria matters a lot, basically. And with me today is Mahdin, as always, and Khayalie, as always. So how are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Hopefully we can this can run smoothly because I'm having a little bit of internet problems. But fingers crossed. I mean, if you're superstitious, that is. I don't think any of us are. But hopefully it'll run smoothly because we prepared for this episode. We prepared a presentation, so it's just easier for everybody to follow the thoughts because we can get a bit deep. But hopefully, some sort of visual guide can help people digest the material or at least remember things. So let's see. This is going to be a novel experience for all of us.
Yes, this is for the first time that actually there is going to be a presentation on our channel, and I think there was a need for this because we uploaded a video uh, in which we were reviewing actually a debate between Mohammad Hijab, Hamza Tzortzis, and two atheist guys who was Aaron Fesser and uh, what was the other guy's name? Mark
Mark
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer.
Mark
Right,
Oppenheimer. So there
right.
was a debate between these people, and in the section in the opening statement of Muhammad Hijab, while we were reviewing that, we actually covered a lot of discussion or a lot of points or arguments against the prophecies which are there in Hadith and Quran. So we recently uploaded the clips from that longer stream. We uploaded two parts of it, but when we were reviewing the comment section, we saw a lot of comments where we realized that I think that a lot of people don't understand that when we are debunking a prophecy, that does not mean that we are going to disprove the prophecy as such, meaning that we would be showing that the prophecy was proven wrong. But actually, that was not our approach in most of the cases. What our approach was that the criteria for a valid prophecy, for it to be considered something miraculous, there are certain conditions that needs to be fulfilled. Those conditions are not something made up or imaginary or subjective. I think we could all agree we are going to discuss those criteria or conditions today, and we're going to show how those conditions are something very logical, and you wouldn't consider them subjective. They are very objective in nature, and I think any logical person would agree with those conditions, because otherwise there would be no sensible way to discern a prophecy from a random statement, or probably just a hunch, right?
A random guess,
Or
basically.
yeah, a random
Yeah.
guess, or a few, a few things that we will discuss today. So in order to distinguish a miraculous prophecy, something that cannot be accomplished by a human, there are certain conditions that should be fulfilled, by that prophecy. So that is what our aim is today, and that's why Mahadin primarily has made a presentation today, so that we're going to show you all those points, and we're going to discuss them in detail.
Yeah, and we are not only going to discuss those points that the presentation, as Kelly said, is prepared by Mahadan. So that's going to cover a lot of philosophical ground, but also towards the end, if time permits, we probably are going to dive into a few of the more so-called popular prophecies from the Quran or from the Hadith literature, basically, and see how far we can get with this presentation first. I will try to cover it as quickly as possible, but then these are something that is beyond our control. If subject requires elaborate explanation, then we'll have to get into it. So without further ado, Madin, take it over.
Yeah. So we're going to try and be very quick with this, really. I mean, not every single part of it is that important, But and I tried to put this together very quickly, so there might be some omissions, indeed. So it's not exhaustive, right? So it's something that I thought was at least relevant, time permitted, in the time permitted I had to prepare this, in between work and so on. So it's probably not the best of presentations. Having said that, we are probably going to go into it to some degree of depth, at least in the relevant areas. So yeah, like you said, without further ado, let's start. I mean, what we're doing is, as Khayalie has said, as Philo has said, we're providing a framework to, like a formula or a set of guidelines to figure out what is a good prophecy versus what is a bad prophecy. What do we mean by that exactly? Well, what we mean is that good prophecy is such that it is a prophecy if it comes true, or it has certain characteristics or ingredients in the nature of it that makes it such that this is something that we should legitimately consider as to be surprising if it comes true, right? It has something about it. In more detail, what that means is that the prophecy has something about it that allows us to infer that, in fact, this was genuinely foretold by some person or being, maybe due to some sort of extrasensory feat or supernatural intervention, whatever that is. Now, so something extraordinary has happened here, basically. Maybe the laws of nature has been violated. Maybe there's a psychic. So this is what we think. So a good prophecy tells us that, in fact, this is indicative of all of these things. Maybe psychic, extrasensory, supernatural, something's happened. Whereas a bad prophecy, we can put it to the left and go, actually, this is such a bad prophecy that we don't infer that. This prophecy is such that it's susceptible to a different alternative explanation that has higher likelihood of being explained without being deferred to a supernatural or extraordinary or psychic explanation. Simple as that. So that's what we're gonna do. As Khayalie said, this is not arbitrary. This is not subjective, right? So if you look at the presentation there, so we're going to talk about what is the criteria for the successful prophecy. That will be soon, and then we're going to be talking about. We're going to link this to explaining why that is a good criteria by talking about it within the lens of the virtues of a good scientific explanation, right? And broadly speaking, why we're going to be talking about this is not just applicable to Islam. It's not, because it's applicable to all scriptures. It's applicable to Christianity, Judaism. It's applicable to Nostradamus, and furthermore, it's applicable to stuff like, as I've written there, horoscopes, tarot cards, mystic men, religious leaders, palm readers, psychics, and even The Simpsons, right? So I don't know if you guys have heard anywhere where people have alleged that Simpsons has parts of it, or at least in certain episodes, scenes which prophesize the future. How does this happen? And we're all together going to explain the mechanics behind this. So not only are we going to show that it doesn't fit the criteria of a successful prophecy, many of these things, and we're going to show why we can offer alternative explanations to explain bad prophecies, but we're gonna show the mechanisms that can explain it, the specific mechanisms, right? And we're going to talk about it, and then eventually we're going to bring it back to an Islamic context, and answer a few more questions. For example, as I've written there, what would be if there is a successful prophecy? Would that be proof of God? Would that be evidence pointing towards God's existence? And we're going to talk about that as well. So Philo, Khayalie, if you guys want to say anything so far, anything you want to add?
Nothing from my side.
Mahdin, the only very minor point I wanted to make over here was that the prophecies that are in the Quran, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is part of Islamic eschatology, basically, right? And this is like most of the prophecies you see are towards pointing towards when will the last day be or the judgment day will be, right? And this is eschatology basically, right? And so for now, we are going to just touch upon the general philosophical idea. But when we get to that point, most of these, since we always our content is mostly geared towards Islam and putting it under the microscope, I just wanted audience to know that how the prophecies work in Islamic context. Yeah, that's about it, right?
Yeah. So let's move on to the next slide and let's continue from there. Okay, yeah. So the writing looks a little bit small. I think maybe that's just my screen. If you want to zoom in a tiny bit for me, it'll be. Or maybe you don't need to do that.
I'll do that, Mahdin. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah, this is for the first time we are doing, so there might be a few. And my screen is not perfect. Can you see it?
Yeah. So it's fine. I can see. I can see. So I think all three of us can collectively just talk about this now. So we've been talking to a few supposed Muslims and so on who are opposing us in this in our last video where we said that these prophecies have been debunked, or the arguments for prophecies have been debunked. And as Khayalie said earlier, what we mean by that is not necessarily that somebody has said in the future X, Y, Z will happen and X, Y, Z didn't happen. Not necessarily. That's one way of debunking it, but that's not the only way, right? What we mean here is that if a prophecy doesn't fulfill a certain criteria, certain philosophical criteria, then it is no longer a good prophecy. It's a bad prophecy. It is a bad prophecy. It is susceptible to an alternative explanation that has higher likelihood of being of explaining why the prophecy seemingly came true. So that's a mouthful, I know, but what I'm trying to say is that something can be a bad prophecy, and that even though it seemingly comes true, and I say seemingly, quote unquote seemingly, but because it's a bad prophecy, it's not a surprise anymore why it's come true. It's not surprising, and that's the point. The whole point of a prophecy is that this is extraordinary. This was so accurate, so precise. Nobody knew of it all the time, and yet it made such a risky prediction, and nobody could have known it. And it came true. That would be a surprise. That's a good prophecy. On the other hand, everybody understands that a bad prophecy is when, for example, it's just a vague saying, and or you saying something about something that everybody already knows. Or you're saying something that's happened in the past, which everybody already knows. Or it's something that you're going to go and bring about, right? Which doesn't mean that you can tell what the future is. It's almost guaranteed it's going to happen. Like if a doctor says, I'm gonna measure your blood now, right? And then I'm going to be able to tell whether there's any diseases or anything. And if he then measures your blood and then sees there's no diseases, was he a prophet? Did he have some psychic foretelling? No, because he just said something. I'm going to do this, and then he went and did it, and then he learned something. And look, it seems like he predicted the future, but that's not a prophecy, though, is it? If anybody says that's a prophecy, that's a bad prophecy, because we say that's self-fulfilling. You're doing something, you're bringing about the prophecy by your own actions, which anybody can do. So everything that I said that intuitively appeals to the considerations we want to make when we distinguish between a good prophecy, which is hard to predict, difficult to understand right at that moment. There's no pre-existing knowledge. Nobody could know about it. So improbable. Those are considerations of good prophecy. And on the other side, the bad prophecy is the opposite of all those things. The opposite of all those things. Yeah. A bad prophecy today would be, just very quickly about a knowledge claim, would be something like me saying that E equals mc squared, and that's a prophecy. Well, everybody would say no. Everybody knows this already. You just look at a physics textbook. If I could tell something about physics without any physics textbook, or anything like that. Something that is beyond the knowledge of physics today, without any training, let's say. That would be a good prophecy, maybe. But if I have to, if I restate modern day knowledge that everybody already knows and that everybody can acquire from a textbook, a pre-existing knowledge, and go, look, E equals mc squared. I'm a prophet. I'm a psychic. Well, no, that's a bad prophecy. Everybody knows this already. It's knowledge that I can just get from anywhere. Okay, so if we've written a list there. This is actually borrowed from one of our atheistic friends who's actually debated Mohammad Hijab and Hamza Tzortzis. His name is Aaron Feza. He was on that big last debate that they had. I think it was the last one. I don't know if they had any more debates after that. So this is his work, and I don't want to take credit for this. This is his, but we broadly agree with all of these. So do you any one of you guys want to read it out? Because I don't want to be the only one talking.
Right, right. I think, Mahdin, I just wanted to clarify that our original stream where we kind of reviewed this debate between Mohammad Hijab, Hamza Tzortzis versus the atheist party consisting of Aaron Fasser and Mark Oppenheimer. So that's where in our review video, part two of Mohammad Hijab's opening statement, underneath that video, basically, or that stream, Aaron had commented this criteria, and that's where we have borrowed it from, basically. So just wanted to give him full credit for this. But yeah, as Mahdin said, we all of us broadly agree with it. Maybe a few tweaks here and there, and then it is good to go, pretty much, right? So the framework says, point one is the prediction must have been made clearly and demonstrably prior to the predicted future event or occurrence. Basically, this pretty seems like a pretty mundane kind of a point, but it has to be very clear. You need to state what your prophecy is about, and it has to be demonstrably prior. And the point here is, you can't have a prophecy about, say, Jesus, and then about that prophecy being written, found in some scripture that was written probably third century AD, right? So you see the discrepancy, because the event that you're talking about a prophecy about is probably in the lifetime of Jesus, but the events or the prophecy that's being describing this prophecy, the only scripture that you found it in is coming from third century AD, basically. So you can't make that connection, basically, whether the prophecy happened at the prior to its occurrence, basically, the event's occurrence, or not, or somebody maybe just manufactured it later on and wrote it in those scriptures just so that it's kind of, as Mahdin said, is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense. It's not exactly the same, by the way, but yeah, you get the point. Anyone wants to add any more thoughts on point one, basically? Mahdin, Khayalie?
Yes, I mean, if we are going to go into detail one by one, as we are discussing these points, right? We don't have to go through all the points we don't have to read through all the points at once, right? But we don't need to. Uh, since we're discussing point number one, and it mentions that it should be demonstratively prior to the predicted future event of occurrence. So this is, if people are not able to understand what it's actually saying, although Philo has explained it, from an Islamic perspective, I would say that the problem with Islamic prophecies in a lot of cases is that when Muslims claim that there are about, let's say, hundreds and hundreds of prophecies or books full of prophecies that were fulfilled, well, a lot, and when I say a lot, actually almost maybe 90% of those prophecy actually happened before they were documented in Hadith literature, right, or in Hadith books. So all of these events that are claimed to have been fulfilled, or all of these prophecies that are claimed to have been fulfilled, all of these happened or came true according to Muslims before they were actually documented in the books of hadiths, or or all these other books, which naturally, makes them, if not, it doesn't make them false, but what
Raises
it
an eyebrow,
makes them
pretty
is
much. Yeah.
exactly what it does is it makes them an invalid proof for at least us in living today, or anyone living after the point, or before, prior to the point when these prophecies actually were documented. Because from there onwards, so once the prophecies have been documented, from there onwards you could claim that, any prophecy, any good prophecy, if it turns out to be true, you would consider that, you could consider that as something maybe supernatural. But of course there are other criteria that you should consider for that, but at least this criteria would be fulfilled. So Muslims need to understand this when they are making a lot of claims, when they're making these claims about about a lot of prophecies, or maybe all of the prophecies that prophet made came or turned out to be true. Lot, and when I say lot, I'd repeat, more than 90% of those prophecies came true according to Muslims before they were documented. So maybe, as even Muhammad Hijab mentioned a few of them in his opening statement during his debate with Aaron Fesser. One, for example, was that the spread of Islam, in the East and the West. So according to and in fact, he even specifically mentioned the name of the regions or countries in which Islam would spread. He used the word spread. Maybe I don't exactly recall the prophecies, but it referred to something like spreading, or maybe Muslims will fight them, or maybe will be able to conquer those regions. Well, all of these regions that were specifically predicted to come under Muslim reign, all of that happened before the hadiths were documented. And what's interesting is this: there were regions um, which were conquered by Muslims afterwards, or areas in which Islam spread after the hadiths were documented. And those areas were not specifically named in those hadiths. So, for example, Indonesia or Malaysia, there are no such names in about these regions. That is very interesting, and Muslims should actually, think about it, because what it shows is this: all the detailed prophecies, or any prophecies which are in a lot of detail, with a lot of specific detail about about the name of the regions, and or any such, any prophecy which goes into a lot of detail, happened before they were documented. But any prophecy which relates to period after they were documented, those prophecies are no way near in that much detail as as the ones who had which had already been fulfilled, which already brings into question all those prophecies, because it now sort of makes you think whether all of these prophecies were made up after all of that happened, or they were actually something that prophet said. So I think this should be a big question that Muslims should think about.
Okay, okay.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, I think there was a lot there. Maybe maybe we could have saved some of that. But that's
Sorry.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. I mean, that's one way to approach this. And indeed, if you want to add particular examples of the hadith in between, it's okay. I think it's fine. That's one way to do that. I thought we might do that later, but that's okay. It's all right. Um, you're so yeah. Everything you said there is correct. In essence, if I could like say what the sentiment expressed there is the following, to emphasize point number one. Yeah, the prediction must be clearly and demonstrably prior to the predicted future event or occurrence. Right? Let's let's understand why that is the case, because the whole point is some people were challenging why why are these principles the criteria. And I'm going to say now, if you want to, whilst I'm talking, if you want to just quickly go to the next slide as well, because I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here. Forgive me for the analogy or the metaphor. I am a bird raiser myself. I own a bird. But so what I'm going to be doing is um, showing that, in fact, these principles coheres with what we consider to be the theoretical virtues of science. If anybody has read a philosophy of science book, they would know that there are actual debates and discussions as to what makes a good scientific theory. And there's a general consensus, even though there's controversy, right? Even though there's some controversy, there's a general consensus that these are the ingredients as to what makes a good scientific theory. And we're gonna show that, in fact, the prophecy standards, the expectations, are incompatible with these theoretical virtues of science. That, in fact, if the prophecy criteria is failed, that is, from that joint criteria that Aaron Fraser has provided, if one or more is unsatisfied, then we could say, in fact, that the prophecy is a bad prophecy. And scientifically, we can say that it can be explained with an alternative explanation, which has higher likelihood. That's what we do in science, right? In science, we have two or more hypotheses, right? One hypothesis may say something about the data, another hypothesis says another thing. So let's say there's a murder, right? And one hypothesis says, when you see there's a knife, there's blood on the scene, there's a glove, there's a car parked outside, that a human went there and killed the person. Another hypothesis says maybe an animal did it, or an alien came and did it. Well, most people, when given that sort of suggestion, they would say no. The second hypothesis, with the alien or animal, that's unlikely. The first hypothesis, that a human, given the signs and the evidence, there's knives, there's a car, and humans usually drive car. Animals don't drive car. We don't know if aliens drive cars. It'd be weird if an alien did. And given that we don't have any evidence of any aliens in the first place, our background knowledge suggests that there isn't any reason to posit or have favor for the second theory, the second hypothesis. Or because we don't have any real background evidence suggesting animals kill with knives and cars, we therefore prefer the first hypothesis, which is that a human caused this murder. It's like a scientific explanation in some sense, right? Roughly speaking. And that's how science proceeds to explain other stuff like gravity, earthquakes, how the sun works and operates, our DNA. We posit different hypotheses and we distinguish between them. How do we do it? We just in that analogy of the murder, I've given some glimpses as to the ingredients. The best theories, as I've written there, the best theories are simple and parsimonious. They have internal coherence. They fit the background data. So the background data is exactly what I was talked about then, which is the background data suggests that humans kill and cause murder. The background evidence doesn't suggest that bears usually kill people with a car or a glove and knife. And the background data has nothing to say about aliens killing people. So as you see, therefore, the first theory has better background data. So that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the alien example. The background data fits the human hypothesis. And finally, it has the greatest explanatory scope and has the capacity to produce precise predictions, right? So that's what we do with a scientific theory. A good scientific theory is able to make precise predictions, right? A good scientific theory has internal coherence. And I'm going to talk about why this applies in a second to the for prophecy criteria. And the best good scientific theories are parsimonious and simple. And a good scientific theory has the greatest explanatory scope. So what do we? Very quickly, I don't want to really go into this in depth, but just very quickly, the greatest explanatory scope simply means that it's able to explain more pieces of evidence than just that one piece of evidence, right? If you have a theory that explains other stuff as well, right, beyond the evidence that you're looking at, but more evidence, and you have another theory that only explains a few pieces of evidence, then the second theory that only explains a few pieces of evidence has a low explanatory scope. The first theory has a broad explanatory scope, right? So yeah, and based on that, you can actually think about why prophecies. Let's say you have a prophecy let's say somebody is uttering a prophecy about the future, etc. And you have one theory saying that this prophecy can be explained through through a natural mechanism. And you have another theory saying that this prophecy is being can only be explained if the prophecy person actually was psychically motivated. Well, is the natural theory explaining other stuff as well about this person, let's say? And one thing that you could say that a natural theory can explain other stuff about Islam. For example, why is there other contradictions of Islam? Why is God not talking about evolution specifically in the Quran? Why is Muhammad's geographical knowledge limited to knowledge limited to his geography? All of these other flaws. So we then look beyond prophecies and we look at other stuff, and we think, all right, okay, if I have a theory that says, in fact, this prophecy is best explained by natural explanation, this has a broader explanatory scope than if we say Muhammad was actually possessed by a divinely inspired angel or whatever. Because the second theory, that he was possessed by a divinely inspired angel, an angel had came and spoke all this to him, doesn't explain the other evidence in Islam. You see that? It doesn't explain why. So it would mean that Muhammad somehow got these prophecies correct, but everything else about the Quran seems man-made. You see that? So it doesn't have the broadest explanatory scope. So that's another reason why we're going to show in a minute why a natural hypothesis has higher likelihood of explaining the prophecies, right? And I want to talk about why it has to be simple and parsimonious, because as Occam's razor says, appeal to the simplest hypothesis. It means ontologically, it needs to appeal to the fewest number of assumptions or fewest number of entities, really. That's kind of the interpretation of Occam's razor, a very rudimentary interpretation. And if you apply the very rudimentary standards of Occam's razor, or technically if you apply the rudimentary one and the modern day takes, in both cases, it favors the natural hypothesis. So on Occam's razor, when we appeal to the supernatural hypothesis to explain a prophecy, that this prophecy can only be explained by a supernatural intervention, we are maximizing the number of entities beyond necessary, right? We're introducing a new entity into the mix, which we've never seen before, which is a supernatural entity. Or we're introducing something like an extrasensory thing, which we've never seen before, right? Whereas a simpler theory doesn't introduce any more new mechanisms that we've not really seen. If it can be explained through this in simpler theory, then I submit that the natural hypothesis should be favored over a supernatural hypothesis. And internal coherence, that simply there shouldn't be that many logical contradictions. There shouldn't be data that contradicts each other. That if one hypothesis is correct, then why are there some contradictions in the mechanisms here and there and so on? That's not important right now. But when we talk about it in line with the criteria, if you want to go back to the criteria now, if you can go back to Aaron Fez's criteria. Please. Yeah, thank you. So internal coherence, possibly matters for point number one. Yeah, especially because it says the prediction must have been clearly and demonstrably prior to the predicted future event or occurrence, right? And that is this particular framework that we're offering here. It coheres with the virtues of a scientific framework to discriminate between a bad prophecy and a good prophecy, precisely because what is a prophecy? A prophecy is such that it predicts the future, right? Now, if the prediction was prior to that future event, then it's not a prophecy by definition. So it's internally incoherent. Yeah. So it'll be incoherent to think that the prophecy was made after the event in question that it's prophesying. And what I don't mean is where you make a prophecy and then a historian, let's say, discovers new information about the past. That is still in the future because the historian is learning something new in the future about the past. So if you make a prophecy about something that Nobody could have known, but you somehow psychically, your mind found out. And then it was confirmed by science later that about something in the past, let's say during when the dinosaurs are reigned, that's still a future event in principle, because the discovery was made in the future. But if you're just talking about things that's already happened, therefore that knowledge can be acquired from the past, then that's not really a prophecy. It's internally incoherent. So it contravenes one of the virtues of science. And the other thing that is that it's, I would say it's a bit of a contradiction, right? It's a logical contradiction also. And most scientific theories should fulfill, should adhere to the laws of contradiction, etc. So, and finally, what I would say that it raises concerns, as Khayalie said, that if you're talking about something that's already been accomplished, then why do you need to appeal to a more, this extraordinary mechanism, which is a supernatural mechanism, when you can just appeal to the more likely candidate? In other words, if that information is readily available, yeah, it's in the past, it's already done, it's written in a book, in a library somewhere. If that information is readily available, why should we think that it was impossible that this person could have prophesied this? Because remember, when the people make prophecies sound alluring, the whole point is that it was so difficult, so impossible, so improbable. But wait a minute, if it's written in the library down the road, or if it's part of your historical knowledge, if it's part of your diary, you've written it down in your diary, it's about something that you could have easily accessed, then can we say that was impossible? No, we can't say it was impossible. Can we say it's improbable? Not necessarily, right? So we should then appeal to the more likely candidate, which is there are mountains of these examples filled through history where there are false prophets who say things about already existing knowledge. But henceforth, if the prophecy is already existing, the knowledge is already existing, it's not really a good prophecy, because you could have just acquired it from elsewhere. So that makes sense, right? And if anybody disputes that rule, then I would submit, then make your side make more sense, because this part of the argument just seems to be straightforward, right? Do you guys want to say anything, by the way?
No, Mahdin, I think you have covered it quite well. So I think shall we cover the point number two,
Yes.
or I think you covered parts of that as well, but we'll go through it, right? So you covered point one broadly, right, and very well. So the point number two is the prediction must clearly and unambiguously be intended to be taken as a prediction of a future event or occurrence, right? Of course, right? The prophecy is by definition, maybe you can say, is a future event that is going to be occurring, right? So you can say that. Now, there is one more thing that you need to be aware of. There are certain prophecies,
Madan, we are
and we
getting a
can
feedback.
have so we can
Continue,
always
Father.
have prophecies. Yeah, we can always have prophecies that are future event, but their future timeline is not defined, right? And so one of the very fundamental thing is here that when you are making a prophecy, and probably this point one kind of somehow intertwines with point number two, that when you're talking about clearly made and all those prophecies are demonstrably prior to the predicted future, you also have to include a proper timeline as to what timeline you are kind of talking about in the future, right? Because if there's no timeline, you can still have a prophecy. You can claim in certain cases that you can claim that prophecy is not yet fulfilled but can be fulfilled in the future, right? So it's still pending in a sense, right? So that's point number two. um Khayalie, Mahdin, you want to add
Yeah,
something to it?
yeah, yeah. I'd like to, yeah. I would add that you have actually referred to the prophecy being, to the requirement of the prophecy being in some sort within some sort of a timeline, right? Because it should predict of an event happening within a timeline so that it's actually falsifiable. Otherwise, there is no way to actually disprove that prophecy. Maybe there are other ways, but in terms of it
Yeah,
makes it a lot more difficult to disprove it if it's not time bound.
you
But I think yes.
why I brought that point here is because of Islamic eschatology, right?
No, no,
Most
I
of the
get that. Yes,
not most, a lot of prophecies are those of that nature, right? And so when
yes,
they are talking about the last hour and the day of judgment and all those, so it's pretty quite unclear. Basically, you can have millions of years before your day of judgment. So that's why I brought that point, basically, in a sense.
exactly. And I mean, yeah, I agree with the point that you're making, that the prophecies should be time bound to be a valid prophecy. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to actually disprove that prophecy, because you could always argue that it might happen in future. It hasn't happened yet, but it might happen in future, so that in that way you could make 100 different prophecies and never be disproven because of the fact that your prophecies were not time bound. So I think yes, that is a problem. But I think the point that is being referred to primarily in this point number two is this, that when when a statement is considered a prophecy, or accepted as a prophecy, it should be very clear that the person who made that statement also wanted that or intended that to be a prophecy, and he was clear enough to show that what I'm saying right now is actually a prophecy, and that you should consider it as something that was coming from a divine source. And why is that important? It's because if a person just mixes up, or maybe he makes his own judgments sometimes. Let's say there's a prophet, a person who claims to have a divine connection, and who claims that he gets uh, or who has access to some sort of future information, not all the future information, but to an extent. So if that person makes a statement, now, being a human, he could make a statement based on his own hunch as well, unless he claims that whatever comes out of his mouth is nothing but what the divine is saying, right? Or something supernatural, or is a prophecy, or that he can not make any mistake in what he's saying on his own even. Now, if that is not his claim, because I'm saying that because from an Islamic perspective, again, that was not what the prophet claimed, that everything he said is exactly true, because he also it's possible that he made his own judgments. Now, if it is not clear whether that person is making his own judgment using his own human intuition, or what he's just said is something that is actually a divine prophecy, or he claims it, or it claims to be divine prophecy, then once again, if anything, what would be the problem if this is what's happening, that his own judgments are getting mixed up sometimes with some sort of supernatural prophecies, is that whenever something is disproven or turns out to be wrong, that person could always claim that, oh, actually that wasn't a divine prophecy, I just said that on my own, based on my own judgment. And whenever something turns out to be true,
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
easily just claim that, actually that was a prophecy from God, and I said it because it was told to me by God. So that's why it's important that whenever a person who claims to be making a prophecy, that statement that is being considered a prophecy, it's clear at the time of that, when that prophecy is being made, that it is a prophecy. It's not considered a prophecy in
Yeah, it's a
hindsight, that
it's a
okay,
proper
now
future
it's
prediction, basically. Yeah.
exactly, it is not the tag of prophecy is not attached to that statement after that event has already happened, because it was never said, that it was never clear whether it is his own judgment or a divine prophecy. So it should be very clear that this is what this is what it was intended to be a prophecy.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. And that's why I brought that eschatological point, basically, because a large part of those eschatological predictions are answering those questions. When will the last hour come by his people, basically, right? At least so far we read in the Hadith literature, right? And then when, oh Prophet Muhammad, when will the last hour come? And so then he lists, okay, when this will happen, this will happen, this. So this should be taken as a prophecy. At least those should be taken as prophecy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yeah.
something based on a hunch feeling, pretty much, right? Mahdin, you want to add something to it? I think.
I'm just going to quickly jump. I'm going to quickly jump ahead and cover many more of these points very quickly, so that we can
Sure,
maybe
sure.
quickly do it. Yeah. So most of these are very similar, right? So number 2, you guys have already articulated it. The prediction must be clearly and unambiguously be intended to be taken as a prediction of a future event or occurrence. Then the number 3 is the predicted future event or occurrence must not be of a mundane, quotidian, predictable, or banal nature. And point 4 is that the prediction must be satisfied by a single, clear, and verifiable event or occurrence. I just want to justify why these things have to be the case, and they all have this. They all have our principle behind it, guiding it, is that we're trying to differentiate it from what otherwise could just be chance or any other natural explanation, such as human effort or just human ingenuity, human intelligence. We're trying to distinguish it from that, because that's what we try to do when we try to figure out whether somebody is a psychic, whether you're truly an astrologer, whether you truly can predict the future. Are you a sorcerer? Are you a wizard? We're trying to differentiate and discriminate between whether you truly are that and whether you're a fraud, whether you're an imposter, right? And that's the defining principle behind it. So therefore we try to be, and this is what the criteria sets out, which helps us try to be scientific as possible, right? So when we say something like it has to be clearly and unambiguously intended to be taken as a prediction of a future event or occurrence, it sets the bar higher, so that it's not some random statement that you've said on the side that could be liable to be explained through maybe chance, right? Then the third point is that the predicted event must not be mundane, which is, I think, far more important, right? Because, or predictable or banal. If today a think tank, or let's say climate change scientists, predict using all this knowledge of science, of biology, of chemistry, of geology, of climatology, or whatever it's called, I don't even know what the disciplines are. But if all that input and all those gems helps illuminate a scientist to predict that indeed there's going to be X, Y, Z in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, and it roughly follows that pattern, were they divinely inspired? Were they a true prophet of God? Is this psychic? Is this a prophecy? No, it's not what we mean, right? Because what we mean by prophecy is something else. We don't mean these mundane, predictable forms of thinking. And when I say mundane here, I'm not saying climate science. Sorry, I should clarify. I don't think climate science is mundane. But what I mean is predictable. It is definitely predictable, right? And predictable in the sense that using instruments, using high-tech equipment, using knowledge, you can predict the future. And if somebody does that, we're not going to call them a prophet. We're not going to call them a sorcerer. We're not going to call them a wizard or psychic. We're going to say, you learned about the future using human intelligence, and therefore is subject to a natural explanation. In similar vein, then, if we, let's say, because we're talking about it in an Islamic context, if Muhammad had an ability to access information, or the knowledge pre-existed during the time of Prophet Muhammad, because he's saying something that is predictable, he's saying something that was already known, right? Then that's not really evidence of a prophecy. It's not. Remember, we're trying to distinguish between a true prophet, a true, something that he could have not known. But if he's saying something about something that was everybody has known at the time, if you can show that he is saying something about something that was known during the time, during the 7th century, then how could that be a future telling? It's no longer extraordinary. It's more ordinary now. And it follows the scientific criteria that I've set out there before. If you can explain the evidence using a simpler theory that follows the background evidence, right, that isn't appealing to more extraordinary entities, And if you can explain it using something simple that we've seen over and over again to work, which is human knowledge, then appeal to that. And I'm going to explain later on why we don't need hard evidence that Muhammad went and plagiarized or went to a country and took books, although we can show that there's communication and trade. We can show this. We're going to do this in a minute. But we don't need to show that. The mere fact, and let me just kind of rewind a bit. In terms of scientific theories, we don't always explain things through direct evidence. Sometimes we make inferences. In fact, the vast majority of science operates in this way. It makes an inference to the best explanation. We have never seen, for example, a mountain form from its beginning stages to its last stages. We've never seen a star form, but we make an inference that, and we fill in the gaps. I think the star formation happened this way, mountains formed in this way. Similarly, we don't always see a murder unfold in front of our eyes, unless it's video recorded, but we can piece together a hypothesis and make an inference to the best explanation that indeed the glove, the knife, the blood, the car outside suggest human came, broke into the house and killed the woman. None of that has to be video recorded. It doesn't have to be directly observed. There doesn't have to be an eyewitness. So similar vein, what I'm trying to say is that we make an inference to the best explanation, that if we can appeal to a more easier theory that coheres with our background evidence, the probabilities that human beings can, using their own intelligence, explain things because it was pre-existing knowledge, then even though we can't show video evidence of Muhammad going to the Alexandria Library or something, or talking to some Greek or whatever, and word per word taking information, even though we can't show this, it is the best inference. We're making an inference to the best explanation. It's a better inference than saying he was inspired by an angel with knowledge that he couldn't have gotten, because he could have gotten this knowledge. He could have gotten it. It's possible. It's more probable than a divine angel, because an angel, divinely inspired angel, how likely is that? It's infinite. We don't have a probability for it. Some people may say it's
infinitesimally improbable.
Yeah, exactly. We can say that.
Or infinitesimally probable, basically, right?
Yes, exactly. it's very low, whatever the case. Yes. Whatever.
Getting tangled into the words.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Even if we think Prophet Muhammad, it was very unlikely for Prophet Muhammad to have acquired that knowledge. It is more likely than an angel coming and giving it him, because it's still more likely that some communication can happen, because it's physically possible. It coheres with the laws of physics. It coheres with how historical transmission occur. It's not impossible. It's not something that is unseen ever in human history. In fact, that's how we understand history, right? If there's some sort of knowledge that appears in the furthest regions of Japan, let's say, that was originally in the Middle East, let's say, and suddenly in Japan 10 years later it's there, historians would make an inference to the best explanation that there must have been some trade or communication, right? It's not as though the historian has to establish that there was trade and communication to demonstrate that this could have traveled there. In fact, the evidence of the fact that it's all the way in Japan is evidence that there was trade and communications. In other words, it's the other way around. The evidence that is in Japan shows that it's there was trade and communication. Yeah, so they make inferences like that to the best explanation. And I would submit that that sort of inference can be made if something is predictable, mundane, and obvious. And there's plenty. So a lot of Muhammad's prophecies can fall short on that, just on that, because they were foreseeable, knowable. There were knowledge that was already existing at the time, or you can just figure it out through intelligent thinking. And we'll prop this point up in a minute, in a second, with more information. Yeah. So let me just quickly cover point 4, and I'll try to be very quick, because this one, the prediction must be satisfied by a single, clear, and verifiable event. Of course, the event in question should not be open to dispute. That's all that means, right? I take a bit of dispute with the word single here, because I don't think prophecies necessarily have to predict only one thing. Let's say it predicts that many events of World War One. Well, that would be a sound prophecy if it predicts the many events of World War One. But what it means is that the things that it's talking about, it itself is clear, it's verifiable. If there's dispute over this event happening in and of itself, if let's say somebody made a prediction of World War One, that on this particular army will do this to another particular army, but historians disagree whether that happened. Yeah, then it's not a verifiable event. It's not a clear event. We're not really sure whether that actually happened, right? And this is, again, it's just common sense, right? If there's dispute over the thing that's being foretold, if I'm saying that I'm going to predict that Brian will marry Mary and they will have twins, but there's no evidence of their having twins because there's dispute over it. There's no hard evidence. In fact, some people say they may have had twins, but most people, most people are saying they've never had children. Then how can we say that the prophecy was fulfilled? Just common sense. If anybody has a dispute with this particular criteria, it's just common sense, right? It's not arbitrary. And the final and the fifth one, the prediction must not be open to interpretation, must be unequivocal and precise. Do you guys want to deal with this one, or do you want me to continue to deal with this one? It's up to you guys.
Go ahead. I'll just add one point is that, the polysemous is the wording. Probably here it is not meant to be wording of the prediction, but it's used for the wording. Basically, you can have a word like. So I'm just adding this point. If your prophecy is in a vague wording, basically, let's say Nostradamus's prophecies, basically, that are considered, a lot of his prophecies are considered to be fulfilled, but his language is so vague, and that's what it is meant when you say polysemous, language is being used, pretty much, right? So you are using something like a word like bright, basically, right? And you could use that word bright for a star. The star is so bright, or my kid is so bright, right? And so you can if you're using a language that is really confusing, basically, and which is really vague, then your prediction is not precise, basically, and it's polysemous, basically. So that's the point. So carry on, Mahdin. You can probably take over.
Kyle, do you want to say anything, or?
No, you can continue for now.
Okay. Philo, would you be able to move to the second slide after this one? Not the second, not the scientific one, but the one after it. Yeah. So I may as well introduce this here to talk about these ones, right? The vagueness or impreciseness of our prophecy, and this is really important. And so this has actually been articulated and formulated into almost like a set of heuristics by a statistician, mathematician, Professor David Hand. He's written a book called The Improbability Principle, and he basically uses this book to explain how miracles, prophecies, and rare events and coincidences, and a prophecy he would explain as a coincidence, basically, can happen through purely natural mechanisms. You hear that? Without appealing to anything magical, supernatural, paranormal, nothing like that. Purely natural mechanisms. So he's trying to explain how these things come through. Because if you're a skeptic, if you're an atheist, if you're an agnostic, then you still have to grapple with the fact that a lot of people around the world talk about coincidences. Like they had a dream, they once had a dream that XYZ will happen, then they woke up and XYZ happened. Or they were thinking about Jamie ringing them. They were thinking about Jamie, and just when they were thinking empathically about Jamie, they received a phone call from Jamie. Or sometimes horoscopes get things correct. You're sitting down on a bus, and you're reading the horoscope, and it says that you're going to meet a charming man called Michael today, or something, or this week, or this month, whatever. And you do meet this person, and then your friend comes along and goes, "Look, astrology works. It's like a prophet, it's a sorcerer. it predicts the future properly, accurately, because I met this man, and it says it over here. How does this happen? We still have to, naturalists and skeptics still have to grapple with explaining how these things happen. And David Hand goes and explains how this can happen. And in fact, David Hand's principles, it's broader than this. But I encourage anybody to go and read his book. He has like 5 principles, but I only took 3 to help me explain prophecies in the Islamic context, and maybe broader than the Islamic context. And the principles are, and he says that these are the things, these are the driving mechanisms that can help explain why these rare events happen. He says the law of truly large numbers, the law of selection, and I've put in there brackets, or survivor effect bias, and the law of near enough, right? And I'm going to explain now why a prophecy not being precise, a prophecy being vague, in fact, is liable to these mechanisms to explain if it comes true, if it seemingly comes true, allegedly comes true, right? In the same sense, it allegedly comes true when you read a horoscope and then your friend meets that love of her life that same week and goes, look, eureka, it works. Well, how did that happen? Was that also divinely inspired? Well, no, we're going to say that is explainable through these natural mechanisms, as is the Islamic prophecies. So the law of truly large numbers, very quickly, is just that when you have a very large world, millions of people, billions of people, and a lot of time, truly extraordinarily rare events can occur. Truly improbable events become, in fact, probable. It sounds paradoxical, but probable. So how is it the case then, for example, how is it the case that people, we have like a 1 in 60 million chance of winning the lottery? Or something like that. Some people say it's less, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's a truly rare event, yet people win the lottery. Well, so let's say Khayalie wins the lottery. And what is the chance of Khayalie winning the lottery? Well, 1 in, let's say, 60 million. Yeah, there's almost 60 million to 1 chance that you're not going to win the lottery. It's 59 million something that you're not going to win the lottery. Right? That is highly improbable. So should we say Khayalie did not win the lottery just because of that? No. What David Hand says is that we should not be asking the question, what is the likelihood of Khayalie winning the lottery? We should be asking the question, rather, what is the likelihood of anybody winning the lottery? Right? When you have truly large numbers of events happening, states of affairs happening worldwide, right? When you have billions of people and you have lots of time, then the chances of these unlikely numbers becomes highly likely. So if there's a 1 in 60 million chance, if you have 1 in 60 million people, then you have at least the potential for at least 1 lottery winner. If you have 120 million people, 2, etc. So what this means is that with big numbers, with large amount of time, with large number of opportunities, a large number of attempts, where there's lots and lots of people playing around the world lotteries, and most people are losing, most people are getting the wrong ticket, most people, but then eureka, eventually, through this trial and error process, through sheer chance, it'll be correct. You'll hit the jackpot. In other words, it's just basic math. If there's a rare event, if you have 1 in 1 million chance, if you have 10 million opportunities, even that rare event will manifest 10 times. Basic math, basic statistics. If we accept that, then we've got a sound explanation now, some mechanism to explain how a prophecy or an astrologer can get something correct. Let's go back to saying, we don't need to change the screen. Let's go back to saying why this fits in with the idea where there is a prophecy that is imprecise or vague. Because if a prophecy, just like astrologers they make imprecise, vague proclamations about what's going to happen. If the prophecy is vague and imprecise, then there's a multitude of possibilities. There's a multitude of attempts one can take to get somehow, through hit and miss, luck, through chance, get it correct. In other words, if you say something like, you will meet a charming man one day, well, because it's vague what charming exactly means, it's open to interpretation, it's subjective. And that increases the probability that it'll come true just by chance, right? Now, and furthermore, because there might be millions of people reading it, the newspaper. Now, just like the lottery, you have a million opportunities for a million people to subjectively reinterpret charming in their own preferred manner, and then find this supposed man who fits that profile. And then they go, Eureka, look, I found this charming man. Because it's not precise, it's vague, it's open-ended, it's open-textured. And given that many people are reading, like I said, many people are reading the horoscope, the chances are high due to the law of large numbers. So in similar vein, if a prophecy in the Quran is imprecise and vague, it doesn't really explain what tall building is, let's say. Right? What does tall mean? Now, you're subject to the same flaw. You have a lot of time, you have a lot of people, just like the people who read astrology horoscopes, and you have this vague term called tall, and you can just somehow shoehorn it in with any fact or state of affairs in the world, right? Tall can mean 10-foot building, 20-foot building, 30-foot building. It could mean a skyscraper, etc., and so on. So the possibilities are endless for you to just find something to fit it in with that wording. And given there's no time limit, and that also adds to the impreciseness. If it doesn't precisely specify a time as well, therefore it's not very risky. And this kind of goes back to another principle of science. It's not falsifiable, right? I should have put that in the other slide, to be honest. When I wrote the virtues of science, I forgot to put it. I should have written in there falsifiability as well. Meaning that there should be a clear instance in which I can go and disprove the thing. But if a prophecy has no end date, it's hard to disprove, because anybody can say that it's not come true yet. But a risky prediction, a risky and precise prophecy has an end date. So say July 5th, 2026 at 3:30 p.m., this will happen. Now, this is very precise and it's very risky, and it will be highly surprising if it comes true. On the other hand, if it has no such end date, it's just open-ended, then it's subject to the law of large numbers, because generations and generations and generations of people will just get born, and there's endless time, and eventually, based on the law of large numbers, it'll come true. Just in the sense that if there's a 1 in billion chance of winning the lottery, let's make the lottery even harder. 1 in billion chance of winning the lottery. If the human race continues endlessly, there's no end date, remember? Well, there'll be one winner of the lottery. So it doesn't matter how hard you make it, how improbable you make it, the law of large numbers will be able to explain it. If the number of opportunities are enough. And I submit the Islamic prophecies, like other prophecies and like astrology, is similar to that. They're so imprecise, the language is vague. There's so many people in the world, and there's no end date. So just like the lottery, it can just come true by hit and miss chance. Those that come true, you can go, oh, look, it's true. And those that don't, you can always say, look, it's not true yet. Maybe it will in the future. It's not falsifiable. So there's a vague prophecy, therefore, can be better explained. Again, remember what we talked about before, the virtues of science, a more likely explanation, that one that fits the background evidence should be selected over one that doesn't fit the background evidence, right? Just like the murder, remember, humans commit murders, aliens don't. The law of large numbers is a known mechanism that has been identified to explain coincidences, how astrology works, remember, psychics works, tarot cards, it's all the same. They all spout something, they say it to 1 million people, right? Most of the time it might not come true, but because there's a large number of people, sometimes unlikely events occur when there's a large number of people. The law of large numbers there applies and it comes true. That's how it's explained, naturalistically. That is our background data. Now, if we see something similar in Islam, an imprecise prophecy, no end date, we can also, therefore, using the virtues of science, appeal to the more likely piece of evidence, likely explanation, which fits the background evidence, which is the law of large numbers, right? And this is in conjunction with this is the law of selection. But I'll talk about that in a second. I'll let you guys interrupt for a bit if you want.
No, I think we should finish. I think point six we covered. We covered point. Which one? Point five we covered right now. So let's move on to. Do you want to add something more to it, Khayalie?
No, I think Martin, you can continue because
Yeah, continue on
I
point six,
have
and
my own
then
slides here, but I will add my own points when when we get there, because if you can go through all the points as the criteria, and then I can add a few, one or two more, in which I'll also bring up a
Yeah, I
few
think.
highlights.
Yeah, I think because we're running short on time, I should try and speed through this as much fast as possible and then
Yes,
apply it. It'll
exactly.
be more digestible. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, and I also mentioned there the law of selection, and just to clarify to the audience what that is, David Hand talks about the law of selection in the sense that human beings obviously are very selective in interpreting things. That's one version of it. The other version of it is that there are usually, for example, I'll give it in one very easy to understand context. Usually, every boxing manager or boxing coach, or most of them, or a large proportion of them at least, at some point will, to a talented, skilled, proficient boxer, suggest that you will become world champion. You will become successful, right? And that happens, right? Sometimes the boxer does become the world champion. Let me give you an example. Well, Mike Tyson was foretold by his coach, Costamato, that he will become the youngest heavyweight world champion in the world. And he did. He became the youngest heavyweight world champion. Now, was Costamato engaging in a prophecy? Is he supernaturally inspired? Well, nobody believes that. And in fact, I would ask what Muslims think about that, because he did successfully predict this. So why isn't he a prophet? Well, most skeptics who have figured it out, like David Hand, can explain it through the law, number one, law of large numbers, and now I'm going to illustrate the law of selection, right? It is the case that every coach, every boxing expert, or whatever you want to call it, every now and then when they're engaging with their protege, they would tell them that you're going to become the world heavyweight champion. You're amazing, you're powerful, you're strong, or something like that. You're going to become really successful. But imagine the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of boxers worldwide who are being told these things, and the vast majority are unsuccessful. Yeah, but because of the law of large numbers, given that so many boxers are putting effort in to become champion, rare events can happen where a boxer will climb out of poverty. Like Mike Tyson, he was born in poverty. He was born in a very humble beginning, but he accomplished the extraordinary, and it was predicted, it was foretold. Yet somebody could say easily, nobody could have foretold that Mike Tyson would climb out of the poverty and then become the world champion, even if he was a great boxer.
can I pause you? Can I pause you, Mahdin, for a second here? This is perfectly fine. A much higher improbable prophecy would have been something like as soon as he was born and predicted to be a world champion. That would have been truly remarkable, right? And this point is, I mean, it's something when we are talking about prophecies, pretty much, even from Abrahamic concepts perspective, if the prophecies are that accurate and that improbable, there is something at least to think of, of those prophecies, pretty much, right? Sorry, I stopped you, but carry on. And I think let's finish this point quickly, and then we can move on to.
Yeah, do you want to
the
just
other
elaborate
points.
what you meant though? Which can you just explain what you meant
No, I was
again?
taking your point of, somebody's, if you're talking about Mike Tyson, he was born into a very humble beginning, as said. And if somebody had come to him and said, okay, this child is going to become a world champion at some point, right? And definitely would have said that. that would have been some kind of really good prediction. But it still would have been, because people, it's still a prediction on something. Basically, you can say that people usually, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. People, when
No,
they hear that, oh,
I would, yeah,
you're gonna.
I would suggest this David Hand's principle, improbability principle, applies here. We're not talking about what are the chances of somebody telling Mike
Yeah,
Tyson
no,
before.
I finally agreed to that point. Yeah, I finally agreed to that point. Yes,
Yeah.
but I'm
Well,
saying still, it's lesser improbable. I mean, it's more improbable, kind of, in a sense. That's what I meant to say here, basically.
I understand. Yeah.
Then
Yeah. But
somebody as his coach saying that. Yeah, I'm just trying to grade it, basically. But I broadly agree with that. David Hand's
sure.
point.
Let me just add something to that, though. Let me add something to what you said. If suppose Mike Tyson's mother predicted he will become the greatest boxer in the world, or something like that. The question is as David Hand asks, what is, when an improbable event happens, we have to ask not what the chances of a specific event happened, what the chances of anything like it would have happened, right? So it's not, so a lottery, 1 in a million chance, 1 in 60 million chance that Khayalie will win the lottery. But the question isn't what is the likelihood of Khayalie winning the lottery. The question is, what is the likelihood of anybody winning the lottery, right? And when you take that into account, and then what is the likelihood of anybody winning the lottery? It might be very high. In fact, if there's a 1 in 60 million chance and there's 6 billion people, it's multiple winners, right? So it's no longer surprising in that sense, right? So that's all you have to ask. And similar vein, when you apply it to the Mike Tyson contest, what is the likelihood of anyone's mother predicting that he will become a successful boxer? That's the question. That's the relevant data relevant consideration we should make. We shouldn't be asking we should not be asking what is the likelihood that Mike Tyson's mother would get it right, that he would become a successful boxer. We should ask, what is the likelihood of anybody's mother predicting successfully the future? And then when you think about it that way, now the law of large numbers apply, because there's millions of mothers saying millions of things to random stuff, and most of the time they're failing. My son's going to be a doctor, doesn't become a doctor. My son's going to be a lawyer, doesn't become a lawyer. My son's going to do this. We're going to be on the president, doesn't. But that it's just like that lottery. Many people are playing, but eventually, because the world is so large, once upon a time, somebody's words are going to stick. The mother's going to say, "You're going to become an astronaut." And it might just be through chance he becomes an astronaut because of the law of large numbers. See that? It's also how astrology works. That's also how tarot cards work, psychics work. So that's what I just wanted to say.
Yeah,
So,
I agree to that point. I was saying that specifically if somebody would have written that, okay, but I see your point. Every mother could say the same thing, and you're now dealing with the law of large numbers, pretty much, right?
yeah. I want to keep it.
And
I'm trying to
that's
keep
the
it on
point.
topic. That's all I'm trying to keep it on topic. You see, So if we're talking about the law of large numbers, I don't want to talk about self-fulfilling prophecies at that point, right? I'm talking conceptually separate, right?
No, I was still dealing with the law of large numbers, but I said, a particular case I brought in. But yeah, carry on. I think we are still on law of large numbers, and we haven't moved to 0.68. So go ahead.
No, we're in law of selection right now. Law of selection, right? So we're talking about the survivor effect. Again, Mike Tyson gets predicted by his coach that he's going to become world champion. The relevant data that we do, the law of selection works in conjunction with the law of large numbers. The relevant data point is that how many other coaches have predicted the same thing, and for most, it doesn't come true. For those that do come true, we end up with a biased sample. So this is where the survivor effect or the selection effect comes through. We're looking for successful examples of people who predicted correctly their career destination. If we're doing that, then obviously we're going to end up a sample of fulfilled prophecies, so to speak. Right? So if we all had to welcome everybody in who became a successful boxer, that had their coaches or fathers or whatever predict successfully that they would become a successful boxer, then the arena would be filled with them. And it'll just look like a whole host of prophecies being fulfilled. Reality here, this is subject to the selection effect or survivor effect. We're only looking at the winners, but we're not looking at the losers, right? What we don't see is that many buildings out there filled with losers who did not have that foretelling fulfilled, the alleged prophecy, where the father, the mother, the son, the brother, the coach, the boxing coach, who inspired and tried to motivate the boxer, saying, "You will become world champion because you're so good." He failed. Yet, in fact, 10 million of them probably failed, and maybe only about 1,000 succeeded because of the law of large numbers. And we only see the winners. And this is, again, we see the winners because of a selection effect, a selection criteria that is being imposed through our biases. Now, if you apply that to the vagueness criteria, the vagueness criterion of the prophecy criteria that we've set out, if a prophecy is very vague, right, you are going to, through selection, through the survivor effect, somehow just manage to bring it into fruition. And it works through stuff as well. The things that we said about of it being a mundane prophecy. In context, for example, the Islamic prophecy regarding buildings, right? It says this, the barefooted Bedouin will compete to make tall buildings, right? Now, you might think that is extraordinary, but it's no more extraordinary than the example that I gave regarding Mike Tyson. It's in fact analogous to Mike Tyson. Yeah, the law of large numbers applies. Again, remember, Mike Tyson is a small proportion of boxers whose coaches got it right. Through selection effect, we are aware of the fact that Mike Tyson's coach got it right. But for most coaches, they were wrong. They were flat out wrong. And because of the law of large numbers, that improbable event occur. And through selection, we only hear about the success cases. In the same vein, then, when a prophecy says Bedouins are going to be competing, etc., it's literally just saying that once we are rich, we are going to be rich one day, and then these things are going to happen. It's mundane in the sense that it's foreseeable by just taking a glance and looking around at the castles, the pyramids, and the knowledge of other buildings that existed during that time. But if an empire becomes successful, then it can always, in hindsight, just like Mike Tyson became successful, in hindsight, through selection, make it look like the prophecy was true. When in reality, just like Customato, Mike Tyson's trainer, he wasn't a prophet. It's just that we only know about Mike Tyson and Customato because we're only looking at the winners out of the large numbers of losers. And similar vein, we only know about this Mohammedan prophecy is because we know about the winners, the Islamic Empire that won. And we're not out of the large number of losers. And we talked about it in a last segment in one of the hijab reviews, Mohammad Hijab reviews. Me and Khayalie talked about it in depth, and we mentioned how every sergeant, every general, every conqueror usually predicts for their empire flourishes, lavish spoils of war, that they're going to be very successful and so on.
Victory in battles. Yes, every battle
Yes.
they enter into,
Yeah.
they sort of make a prediction. They make, in a way, they're making a prediction that they're going to win that war.
Yes.
You know, so that is a prediction that they make, and we only see those whose prophecy actually turns out to be true in a way, because we see the survivors. We see, okay, Alexander won so many wars. You could say that in a way he his prediction got right in that many number of times, because of the fact that each time a person enters into a war, he intends to win that war, and therefore he's making a prediction. In a way, he says to himself, at least, if not uh, to his soldiers. Many times they even say that to his soldiers, that we are here today to win. And so we only see the winners, and based on that, if we only look at the winners and we see, okay, all of these winners had all these number of correct prophecies, would I conclude that based on that, now this means that they got this information from a divine source? No, we are actually being subjected to this survivorship bias that Mahadan is just referring to, or the selection bias.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Exactly. And I was hoping one of you guys intervened because I don't want it to be just me talking. But that's great. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was trying to explain. And that these work together. Yeah, the law of selection, survivor bias works together with the law of large numbers, the large number of opportunities. In this case, the large number of conquests and empires and generals. Yeah, and it's very analogous to the Mike Tyson situation. The large number of coaches telling their studious boxing athlete that you will become the champion, and he does. Well, only one of them did, the winner, or the winners, and the large proportion of them lost. In similar vein, Islam was one of the winners, and the large proportion of them lost, but we're just seeing the winners, and therefore it looks like, just like Castamada looks like, and the prophecy was foretold. And this is important because if Muslims are not willing to grant Castamado was a prophet, and is willing to explain the rational explanations that I'm giving here, the naturalistic mechanisms that David Hand has listed down, then then they must also accept, by definition, that these mechanisms apply to Muhammad as well, because they are analogous. They're both the same, right? I don't think I need to go through it again to explain why it's the same, but they are the same. Just listen to me again, rewind the tape. But they are same. They're all subject to the same same forces here: the law of large numbers, law of selection, and
Exactly.
it can be
I mean,
accepted. Yeah. Sorry, go
just
on.
to maybe if people are still not able to see how that example that we are trying to apply on in case of Islam, how does that actually apply to that? What you have to think about is this: just imagine that in the world there are, you know, a large number of humans living at this at you know at any given time. Among those people, let's say at any given time a few thousand people, or maybe few more than that, are making prophecies or claiming to be connected to some divine source, or maybe they think that they can make some sort of prophecies. Now many of them would go unnoticed or would not be taken serious, because it is very unlikely that a person would be able to make good prophecies, or prophecies that turned out to be true. Now if but what would happen is, throughout in human history, it is bound to happen at some time because of the law of large numbers. Sorry, I might be in fact, this might be an example of the law of large numbers. So it would be, in fact, but it would eventually apply to the survivorship bias as well, because what would happen is, due to the law of large numbers, eventually you would see some humans at some point in history making some number of prophecies which turns out to be correct. It could be even more than the number that you would expect, would expect to come true, even if they are slightly more specific, and they are not expected to be true in any given random case. But given the large sample size of human history, and again, the number of humans that are alive at any given time, it is not unlikely that at some point in human history a person makes a few number of prophecies which all turned out to be true. And then based on that, let's say people gather around him, or take him as a leader, and then those group of people actually, that person survives as a prophet. Now that survival, that's that in a way, the survival of that person, of course, this is primarily an example of the law of large numbers. But how does the selection bias comes into
It
focus
is
in this
selection
case?
as well. Yeah,
Sorry.
Kylie, it is selection as well. No, they both work together.
Exactly, yeah.
Selection and
Yeah,
law of
exactly.
large numbers work together.
Exactly. So it would, the selection bias would apply to this. How? Because once, now when you're looking at it from in hindsight, you'll see, wow, this person made so many prophecies, and it is very unlikely that this could happen randomly, because of the number of prophecies that he made. But What you're not considering is that you're looking at only a single or a very diminished size of the population. You're not looking at the entire population. You're in a way looking at the survivors, your survivors only. The only survivor was a person who turned out to have made some prophecies which turned out to be true. It was a random event, it wasn't any supernatural event, but this was bound to happen because of the large number of because of the time that was involved, given the human history, the amount of human history that we have, and the number of humans that we have around the world. So it could happen at any place, any time in human history. It would not be happening every time or and all the time. We would not expect that, and that is what exactly we see or observe in human history. We see this happening in very rare events, that someone would claim to be a prophet and would be taken seriously by people. And I think so people need to understand this would exactly be something that you would expect to see under the understand when you once you understand what how the law of large numbers it comes into display or comes into action, and how we as humans then perceive that very selectively, and having that survivorship bias or selection bias, we deduce that this is something very special, or maybe associate or attribute supernatural sources to that events.
Yep, yeah, and that is absolutely correct. Um, uh, because these mechanisms, the law of large numbers, the law of selection, and the law of near enough, which I'll talk about in a second, it's they explain every other type of non-Islamic prophecy that exists, right? That are so
Mm.
called to be fulfilled. Because even Muslims cannot deny that there are millions, if not millions, of people who claim to have fulfilled the prophecy in a different religion. There are millions of people who claim to have their favorite psychic foretell the future. The millions of mystic, mages and all these weird people, tarot card readers, and finally horoscopes, as we've talked about. There are people who say they follow and believe in these things. How are they getting this correct? And some of them actually come and say, and they'll tell you that it was exact. The person told me this is going to happen, and it came true. The point with the law of large numbers is that it explains why rare. When you say he made a specific prediction and it came true, you're saying this is so unlikely that he'd be able to know this. But the point about the law of large numbers is that unlikelihood can be met because of the large number of opportunities, because of the large number of people being told a prophecy. We don't really care about the specific prophecy, the specific foretelling, that is being told. What we care about is the fact that there are multiple other foretellings about other things. So the question isn't how likely is one specific foretelling about you will become. Let's say Charles will become a millionaire, and he becomes a millionaire. Let's say the, the relevant piece of data is not merely what is the chance of Charles becoming a millionaire. The chances of Charles becoming a millionaire is kind of low. Yeah, I agree. But the relevant question is what is the chance of any prophecy being fulfilled? What is the chance of anyone becoming a millionaire? These are the things that we should be asking, because then the question becomes more global and about the number of opportunities that exist worldwide. And then when you ask that, then you can figure out that the probability of anyone becoming a millionaire is actually pretty high, right? Or any one person in the world who will become a millionaire, right? So any individual person becoming a millionaire is low. But a person becoming a millionaire, there's every year there are millionaires. So there is at least a high enough probability for it to actually happen in the world, right? So, given the law of large numbers. And in the same sense, we should be looking at not just as Khayalie said, not merely the fact that Muhammad was making a prophecy. We should be thinking about what are the chances of anybody, any civilization, any culture, any area of the world, any proponent, any advocate, any so-called other prophet getting it right. And then when you think about it that way, then you think, all right, the probability is pretty high that at least one of these guys are going to get it right. Just like the probability is high, just at least one of these guys are going to become a millionaire. At least one of these guys are going to win the lottery. Yeah, out of 60 million people, at least one of these guys are going to win the lottery. So therefore, out of 60 million, let's say, religions, at least one of them or some of them, or a small proportion of them are going to get it right, because given the number of prophecies that they're making, right? And then the survivor effect takes fold. The successful empires, specifically to the tall building one, or stuff like the way to conquer neighboring areas of the world, and they just do. And how they would have known that? The Bedouins wouldn't have no ability to know that. In fact, the Bedouins at the time would have thought there was no chance that I'm going to take over those other empires. Well, just like the Bedouins there were many other cultures that thought similarly, and they failed. They thought perhaps, look, we're really poor and so on, but this very charismatic person is telling me that we're going to take over the world, right? They're prophesizing that.
Madan,
Yeah,
can you hear me? Can I interject you for a second?
sure, go on.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make here is I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. So, uh, a Muslim might object to this and saying that there is a cumulative case to be made for Prophet Muhammad, that he proclaimed that he was a prophet. He brought in the Quran, right? And then he did all those things. Then his life was such that, and all those things. And now consider the prophecies as a part of it. And if they come true, are they included in the same law of truly large numbers, or they are separate from those?
So it depends what you're talking about there. I don't know what you mean. What other stuff came true?
Supposedly, you have a cumulative case for somebody being a prophet, right? That's we are talking about Prophet Muhammad, right?
Yeah, but
So
what is
there
the
is a
case?
Quran. He came up with a book called Quran. He claimed that he received the revelation from God through angel Jibreel and all those things, right? Now this is a very specific case than just a simple, plain and simple law of truly large numbers, right? I mean, there
Yeah,
might have
so
been a few more,
No,
Now your sample size is reduced a little bit more, right? There were probably a few more prophets, but now it's not, uh, you know, as large a number. Basically, somebody might object to it, right? Not every Tom, Dick, and Harry was claiming to be a prophet and then giving predictions, right? Or prophecies, if you want to call them.
no, but what I would say is that, as we mentioned, given there are two different points. When we're discussing prophecies only, there is, as Mahdin mentioned, what we should consider is what is the chance that someone in the world would claim to know about the future, because some of the things that he said turned out to be true. And let's say 10,
Right,
20,
I
or
agree.
25 or 30
Independently, you're
things
right.
that he said.
Yeah,
Yes.
independently, you're
Now,
right. By the
yes,
way, yeah.
exactly. Now, when you referring to some other, as you mentioned, the cumulative case that Muslims try to build, well, I wouldn't reject it prima facie. I would look into that, but I would see, and as we have gone through different proofs that Muslim often present or put forward as a proof of Islam, I think we have gone through few of them, and there are clear flaws and weaknesses in them. So given that, if all of the other things was something that you were actually true, then of course I think a cumulative case would continuously diminish the probability of something like that happening. But once again, you'll have to consider that what sort of events are we talking about, how unlikely were they exactly, and also they weren't, in a probability we also study how likely were the we have to make sure that these events were not correlated. So for example, if one event is very correlated with the other one happening,
You're
we are
saying
not going to
mutually
give
exclusive, pretty much, right?
exactly. So
Yeah,
these two
yeah.
things should be unlikely to happen together, not likely to happen together. So if all those things for some reason were likely to happen together, then I think then the cumulative case that we are trying to build would actually, would not be building that case. In fact, it would be proving the opposite. But but generally speaking, if Muslims could present strong evidence and build a strong cumulative case, then of course the overall probability could be shown or be demonstrated as being very unlikely or very unlikely as something that a human could ever, or something that could ever happen in human history. Maybe they could present that case, being honest and having gone
For
through
our
the majority
presentation's
of,
case,
yeah,
yeah,
for our
for our
presentation case, that
presentation's
is not,
purposes, we're going to
yeah,
take it independently. The prophecies alone,
independent,
basically,
yes, because
in
yeah,
this
because we
presentation.
have
Yes, I agree.
discussed many of those proofs that Muslims present
Yeah,
separately, and we have shown how weak they are.
right, right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I kind of, yeah, I pretty 70% agree with Kylie, and I would put it in a slightly different way, but it's similar. I would say that the idea of prophecies is separate indeed. Like, so scientific prophecies, for example, that's one piece of evidence, right? You may say, but we could offer a different explanation for that. Like the explanation that we're giving for these sort of prophecies is that you can make a vague, imprecise statement, and the fact that there are millions of other people making vague, imprecise, and in fact, even within your own lifetime, there are many other. So within one individual's lifetime, there are many sources of vague, imprecise statements, and then you have many individuals around who are making vague, imprecise statements, right? You have thousands of people here, thousands of people down there, and so on. So it's subject to the law of large numbers, where those statements can come true, and through selection as well, the survivor effect. It could very well be that there are other people who have made similar vague and imprecise statements, who we're just not hearing about them, right? There's, the idea about, psychics and horoscope enthusiasts, or the actual people, astrologers, is that they make statements that sometimes come true, indeed, yeah, but people who are not astrologers also make similar statements sometimes, and they come true as well. It just never recorded or registered. But because we give some regard to the astrologer, it gets counted. Again, it's subject to survivor effect, subject to the law of large numbers, and yeah. So in terms of prophecies, we can see it as this self-contained thing where it's subject to the fact that he's especially the ones that are not based on pre-existing knowledge. If it's a pre-existing knowledge, or it's a prophecy about something that's already happened, yeah, then it's no longer at all interesting. That's not really coming true. Sorry, it's not really predicting the future in any sense. But at least if it's a vague statement, it might seemingly come true and seemingly predict the future. But what we're trying to say is that can be explained through the law of large numbers and law of selection. However, the other parts of Islam, we don't need to use these mechanisms to explain it. The other parts of Islam can be explained through other means. Yeah, scientific knowledge in the Quran, for example, could just simply be straightforward plagiarism. Yeah, that is not subject to chance, hit and miss, selection bias, survivorship bias. That's just him acquiring this stuff from pre-existing knowledge. And similarly, the linguistic miracle, we can just simply say the subjective criteria, and
So,
has no objective.
Mahdin, sorry,
Hmm.
before you go ahead, I just want to point out about the scientific miracle. So I think, are you making a distinction between scientific prophecies and scientific miracle? Because one could, so there could be two cases that a Muslim could make, right? He could say that the kind of the scientific facts that are mentioned in Quran, Prophet had no access to that information, even though it was available. It might be available at the time. Prophet himself did not have any access to that information. So that, I think, could be considered as something, some alternate explanation. But if we are referring to what we could call the scientific prophecies, because of something that was discovered later on, or discovered several hundred years later after the Quran was written, then I think in that case something similar could apply, because then the weakness of the wording and all of that, what we're just talking today, I think would apply to that case as well, right? The weakness of the wordings,
Yeah, yeah.
not being
I
very
mean,
specific, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends. Yeah. So the scientific miracles, if it's argued that way, that one of the flaws of it is that it's vague and wording, then it can be subject to the law of numbers and so on. But it doesn't wholly have to be explained that way, right? In part of it can be explained through simple plagiarism, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
I mean, in that case, it would, as I mentioned,
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. You can put the scientific, you can put some parts of the scientific miracle as a prophecy, right? So scientific miracle prophecies as
yes,
part of the general prophecy umbrella, include it into this, right? And I'll talk about in a second what happens where one individual has many prophecies. Does that change anything in terms of the law of large numbers and law of selection? Right. But what I'm saying is that, all right, forget scientific. Maybe I was wrong to characterize it uniformly as attributable to plagiarism. Let's just for sake of argument put it in the category of general prophecies and have the same potential flaws of vagary, impreciseness, and we could potentially explain it through law of large numbers, law of selection, law of near enough, right? But when you're building the cumulative case, you're trying to build other stuff like Muhammad was. He made the linguistic miracle, for example, and for that you could explain it without appealing to the law of large numbers. You could simply say the criteria is
I agree.
subjective, right? The criteria hasn't been validated by objective-minded linguists, and it's not really reproducible, etc. And what else is there? I mean, apart from that, there's nothing else. But everything else can be explained through the law of large number. And you may think, but what are the chances of this many different prophetic events? Well, think about it this way. First of all, what David Hahn would say is that, in fact, there is a probability for multiple lottery winners, as in one person winning the lottery and winning the lottery again in the same week. There is a probability. And is it subject to the law of large numbers? He needs to ask again.
No, it's akin to a person winning a lottery again and again, time after time after time after time. That would be probably a more analogous situation, right, Mahdin?
No. I was going to go into that. I was going to explain that.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like that, but I was going to explain that that's how you should be thinking about it, right? So, in terms of the law of large numbers, you would ask, what is the probability of being struck by lightning twice, or the lottery twice, lottery 3 times, lottery 4 times, etc. But so you're going to be asking the question, not what is the probability of me being struck, of anybody being struck. And guess what? It can still be explained through the law of large numbers. But when it can't, that's when you appeal to something else. And can you scroll past? Go to the next slide. Just go to the next slide for a moment, please, Philo. Sorry, go to the final slide, please. Final slide. Final one. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, so can you see the second paragraph? Right. So a perfect prophecy fitting the prophecy criteria may hit the mark, and it may be explained as an extrasensory feat, but may still remain indistinguishable from having a natural explanation. Improbability principle, meaning that could still be the driving force behind a seemingly fulfilled prophecy. Unless there are, I foreshadowed what we were saying yesterday when I wrote this. Unless there are so many examples that it becomes too unlikely to be explained naturally. And so the improbability principle is not like this kind of like, what's the word? This magic card that can always be appealed to. If in fact the probability of explaining 100 lottery victories in one day for one person, cannot be explained through the law of large numbers, cannot be explained through the selection effect, then indeed,
Right.
then we have to think about another explanation.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was putting, certain prophecies by a certain person time and again coming true. So that's what the example I had in mind, kind of.
Let me say that there is a difference between, however, winning lotteries and having one person predict many things. It's not the same. The likelihood of one person winning 2 lotteries is far higher. It's really improbable. Sorry, so far lower. It's really low, the likelihood of one person winning 2 lotteries than is a psychic who's been successfully predicting things all his life, a tarot card reader that's been successfully predicting many things, a horoscope company. Let's say you're a horoscope company, you publish a journal, you publish in a newsletter this horoscope that millions of people read, and millions of people get it right, and it gets correct every week. Every week this happens. Now you see there's a difference between winning the lottery, but won by one person, and the horoscope company winning the lottery or winning the prediction or succeeding with the horoscope prediction multiple times. In fact, in 1 month, the horoscope company can produce 20 different horoscopes, and you can find many people saying it came true. You see that? And I would submit the Islamic prophecy therefore can come true just like that. So the mere fact that it's littered with loads of scientific and non-scientific prophecies is no more disanalogous to astrology, horoscopes, psychics, etc. It's not comparable to the multiple lottery winner per day or something like that.
Also,
I
yes.
agree. I agree.
Also,
Yeah. Go ahead, Khayalie.
yes. And I will add on to that the existence of scientifically incorrect statements and actually incorrect prophecies, actually, because we are going to discuss a few of them later, a bit later, probably, if we have some time. uh, that exactly then, you know, brings down the entire building of this entire case that they were trying to build. If they try to build that case, that cumulative case about there being so many true prophecies and so many scientific prophecies in Quran or in Hadith, it will all be disproven, maybe, probably. I mean, if I can use that word, all of that you know, becomes, the
Is
case
yet
even
to come.
becomes more weak. Yeah, all of that becomes even more weak. The entire case becomes very weak when we consider that there are scientifically incorrect statements that Muslims then try to reinterpret, change the, you know, change the way they use that word, in that even if that word is used in that very context, generally they would use it in a very different way. They would even change, when I will discuss a few incorrect prophecies that are mentioned in the hadith, how they change the entire context quite forcefully to make sure that the prophecy doesn't seem to be to have been disproven.
Falsified. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
exactly, given that that is how they
So
treat, well,
remember, I'm just
that is
acting as a
yes.
devil's
I
advocate here,
understand. I
right?
understand. Of
Yeah.
course. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
you have become a Muslim. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I do
I'm
agree
saying
with
that.
all of you. This is to
Yeah, yeah.
come, right? We are going to talk about these
Exactly.
prophecies and why they don't work.
Yes.
Basically, that's
Exactly.
something to come ahead, basically, right?
Exactly. So
Right.
when you look at that and the way that Muslims try to then solve those problems by reinterpreting, using different tools, you know, maybe twisting the words, trying to forcefully change the meaning of what was trying to be said over there in that hadith or prophecy. That is how then probably you'll understand. I mean, I think you should then, you know, think about that what you're claiming as a claiming to be a cumulative case, it doesn't exist. It is non-existent.
Okay, do you want to go back to the original slide, because we came to the end here. Yeah, right. And I think on the other
Yeah,
one that we were on the vague criteria, and I think we've talked about vagary enough, and we now
yeah.
understand that something
What I
being
was,
vague.
what I
Yeah.
was, yeah, what I was just referring to about one of the tactics that Muslims try to use when it comes to the incorrect statements in Quran regarding the scientific uh, facts about our world, about the physical world. I think that is how they try to solve it. They try to make it vague forcefully, or they just say that, oh, it's close enough. It's, you know, it seems it isn't that wrong. They'll somehow. I mean, it doesn't apply exactly, but I think this principle also applies in that situation. But of course, please go ahead and explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. The near enough principles. That's good. I probably don't need to talk about that too much. But the near enough principle, it just means that the human mind, just like the law, kind of like the law of selection, where we only care about the winners and we don't look at the losers. The human mind also tries to craft things in a way so that it helps. We look for signs that fulfill the prophecy, especially when you're lured by it through confirmation bias, and especially when you're a passionate advocate to try and retrofit it into the prophecy and any particular event. So you look for situations that are very close enough to fit what the words say, but there are some ambiguities, there are some discrepancies, there are some difficulties. It doesn't fit neatly, and most people just ignore those incompatibilities. They just ignore it, or they hand wave it away, they rationalize it away. One of the example is the barefooted Bedouins who are competing to make structures. I mean, is it near enough? You can argue that David Hand's third principle, the near enough principle, is an application there. So what the Muslims are doing is that they're finding a situation where somebody Arab looking, potentially a descendant of, probably has no genealogical connection to the original Bedouins.
Right, Mahdin, there is one more point to this, the exact point that you are making, is that whether the word is Bedouins or the word is shepherd. I've heard both the translations, by the way. So this is like everything is taken near enough, basically. Shepherds versus Bedouins versus desert dwellers or whatever. You can take whatever that fits in to your narrative to prove it true. Basically, anything nearby near enough is gonna work for you pretty much.
Yeah, and exactly. So the principle of near enough is like a probability sleeve as well. So these things amplify the probability of rare events to occur, like prophecies coming true. If the word is vague, if you have a large number of opportunities, and you're only looking at the survivors, and furthermore, you just only care about whether it closely fits, near enough, right? Near enough, that's what you care about. It says Bedouins, but there's no Bedouin, but we're just going to assume an interpretation that says it didn't mean literally Bedouins, it just means the descendants. Oh, are they not the descendants? Or it just means people who were Arab looking. That's what it means now, right? They might not be the descendants, direct descendants, but they're just Arabs. That's all that matters. So we've gone from Bedouins or shepherds to Arabs. And apparently,
right, and not even descendants, nowhere close to being descendants. We got through all the descendants and the descendants of descendants, but it's just all near enough, pretty much. Yeah.
So what happens is that by all of these mechanisms increase the probability of finding a prophecy to be fulfilled or true, right? The near enough makes you loosen the criteria. It's no longer the specific criteria, it's a vague, broad, whatever thing that you wanted to do type of criteria, and you fit it in yourself. So I don't need to mention anything more about that, but you can see the logical...
I think we should move on to point number 6, for self-fulfilling prophecy, and then take it from there.
Yeah, and this is quite self-explanatory. If a prediction, a prophecy, an alleged prophesier is saying something that people can just bring about through their own active effort, after having heard of it, and then they try to do it, especially if you're inspired by it, motivated by it, especially if you're indirectly motivated by it, because you're psychologically, you might be under some sort of placebo effect, where the power of suggestion, which are again demonstrated psychological mechanisms. You can steer towards bringing up the fulfillment of the prophecy. And in fact, this is what happens. For example, there are many in the Islamic context. There are many people today claiming to be the Mahdi, the savior of humanity, right? But most of them are debunked by Muslims themselves as these are frauds. They're not really the Mahdi. The Mahdi won't come this way. The Mahdi won't come that way. They say. Nobody can just self-elect themselves as the Mahdi. But there are people genuinely, either through delusion or sheer strong inspiration or fabrication or dishonesty, who are motivated to assert that they are the Mahdi. They want to do those things, and they'll act like that they are the Mahdi, right? So given that this is a known mechanism, and I'm just giving you one example there, history of humanity is littered with these examples. I mean, look at people who think they're Jesus, the second coming of Jesus. I know many homeless men who think they are Jesus Christ, right? They might be a little bit insane, and there are people out there who think they are a religious prophet. Look at the nation of Islam. Look at the Mormons, right? There are plenty of look at what is that a particular sect of maybe Buddhism or Hinduism, I don't know what it is, who are motivated to he knowingly fabricated a religion. I forgot what it's called, and he turned out to be a bit of a child abuser or something like that. Whatever the case, you get the point. There are known frauds, no people who want to were inspired to bring about a religious cause, and so this is not surprising. So what I'm saying is here, if there's a prediction, if it's made, people can just actively bring it about. They can put the effort in and bring it about. Now, are we just offering an alternative explanation here? This is what some of the people had objected to, us saying you're just giving an alternative explanation. No, not just giving an alternative explanation. We're saying that this explanation is more likely than the supernatural explanation. Right? Now let's explain that. Can you go to the next slide, please, Philo? Yeah, next one after this. And after, this is fine. This is fine. If you look at number 2, we ought to select explanations which have higher probability to explain the data. So before appealing to the supernatural, we have to rule out naturalistic explanations. Right? And I wrote there, that's what we do for magic tricks. Right? You see a magic trick, David Copperfield, moved the Statue of Liberty. Nobody in their right mind genuinely thought he moved the Statue of Liberty. They offered every other explanation, alternative explanations to the final explanation that Copperfield may have wanted everyone to believe, which is he did it through his magic powers. Everybody else thought, all right, it is video camera tricks. This was like a stunt. It involved mechanics and stuff, smoke screens, whatever, doesn't matter. People were in on it. Are they just being biased? Are we just offering random alternative explanations? No, we intuitively realize that those explanations are more likely than a magical, paranormal, or supernatural explanation. Reason being, and it's not just intuition, probability theory suggests the same, because we've never seen a supernatural explanation. We've never seen a paranormal explanation, not a confirmed one, not a verified one, not under testable conditions. But we've seen multiple natural explanations, including people like pretending to be the Mahdi or deluded in thinking they're the Mahdi, people who deluded in thinking they're Jesus Christ. So given that religious believers can, in their own delusions, bring about or try to follow prophecies, now we have a natural explanation that's higher prior probability that fits the background evidence, and we should appeal to that, just like how we explain magic. So if you look at number 4, we then thereby infer the best explanation, right? Again, I wrote that most of science is indirect. So we don't need to necessarily prove that any individual inspired by Islam or motivated by Islam, we don't have to show through like testimonial or video evidence or some sort of historical literature that they attempted to bring about the prophecy, that there was this kind of conspiracy, or unintentionally. We don't need to prove that, because remember, we explain things in history through inferences. We explain things in science through inferences to the best explanation. So it's the inference to the best explanation that it's more probable that when there's a dispute between two explanations, with one of them being it can be explained through a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the other one is just that it's a supernatural event, we should appeal to the self-fulfilling prophecy simply because it's higher prior probability, right? It fits our background evidence. It's a humanly possible thing to do. It has been done. History is filled with real evidence of it being done, but we don't have any evidence of supernatural explanation. So this is how science works. It's how we explain the murder as well. We don't have any evidence of aliens explaining the murder scene, right? But we do have explanation of humans explaining the murder scene. So we go for the most probable explanation, probable hypothesis, and we discard the alien hypothesis as unlikely. So I just wanted to really be really sharp here about what I'm saying, so that people know that we're not talking about just mere alternative explanations. It's not arbitrary. It follows probability theory. It's in line with science, and it increases the probability of one hypothesis based on everything I've said, and decreases the probability of the other one based on everything I said, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think one thing that needs to be, stressed to everybody who's listening, especially our Muslim audience, basically, that the probability is playing a huge role here, and the prior probability of any naturalistic explanation is gonna be, even if it seems infinitesimal to you, is still higher than any supernatural explanation, because we haven't had any kind of an experience with supernatural. We have claims of those though, but we can't assign a real probability. I mean, how do you assign a probability to a supernatural event as such anyways? Basically, it's just based on a feel good factor in a sense, right? Okay, so I think we are done with that slide. Khayalie, you want to add something to it? Mahdin, you finished the argument, right? We've covered everything, right, from the slide, or we still have some left?
Let's just talk about.
We have gone to and fro, so that's why it's a little tough to. But I think we broadly covered. But if there's a point left, maybe you can go
Let me
through it.
just summarize the last couple of slides. Then let me just bring it home, right?
Sure.
So the last couple of slides that we have not looked at all.
Which one would you want me to be on the screen?
Argument one. Yeah.
Argument.
This would have been. I could complete this much quicker, but because we're talking in between as well, do you get it? But it's something that I probably could have done within 45 minutes, really. But because we're talking about things as well, it gets very long-winded. But that's ultimately necessary, right? I thought we'll probably talk about it anyway, and this is going to happen anyway. But let me just try and finish off the last couple of ones. So based on everything that I've said, right? Here's a few arguments. Again, they're not the only arguments you can make, but they're a summary of what things that I've already. Anybody who's been following me would have gathered these arguments to be the correct one. So premise one: naturalistic explanations have higher likelihood, prior probability than a supernatural explanation due to induction, the background evidence. Again, following the scientific method. Premise two: the improbability principle is a naturalistic explanation. So, and you can, by the way, you can adjust this as much as you want. You can, instead of putting the improbability principle, you can put in self-fulfilling acts is a naturalistic explanation, or making reasonable, predictable prophecies based on pre-existing knowledge using your own human ingenuity is a naturalistic explanation. And you can put that, replace improbability principle with that in this situation as well. And the argument will have the same structure. So the improbability principle is a naturalistic explanation, premise 3. Therefore, the improbability principle has higher likelihood than a supernatural explanation. And similarly, the self-fulfilling prophecies have higher likelihood than a supernatural explanation, or predicting things through pre-existing knowledge has higher likelihood than a supernatural explanation. It simply does, right? Everybody would agree with that. And if we accept that, then you can build it into another argument and say, therefore, Muhammad was more likely to have accomplished these seemingly prophetic acts through purely naturally, and we don't need to appeal to the divine. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So this argument is, if one or more of the prophecy criteria remains unsatisfied, then it is at least possible that a natural explanation exists to explain any seemingly fulfilled prophecy. Now, if you notice, if one of the, it doesn't matter which one, if one of those are false, one of the criteria, one of the 5 criterion requirements isn't satisfied, then, because it's a cumulative case, they all have to be satisfied. Then, by definition, if you look at the criteria, it can just come by through that, through what it entails, in the sense that if it dissatisfies the mundane criteria, that the prophecy has to be non-mundane, but it's a mundane prophecy, then you can just, it is possible that it can be explained through that natural explanation, that the person was able to do it through complete human ingenuity, right? Because something that is mundane just means it's knowable, understandable, predictable. And if it's predictable, then it can be explained through that. So that's what I'm saying. So if one or more of the prophecy criteria remains unsatisfied, then it's at least possible that a natural explanation exists to explain any seemingly fulfilled prophecy. Natural explanations higher prior probability than supernatural explanations. Therefore, a natural explanation is more likely to be behind a seemingly fulfilled prophecy, again, through an inference to the best explanation. Yeah, I don't think I need to go into that. I think people understand exactly what I mean from the last one. And let's go to the last slide. The last slide, and then we are calling it a day. So just summing this up now, and I would have thought in this situation we would have ended up talking about Islam. Do you get it? But I think we've done that already, interspersed throughout this presentation. So let me just read out these slides. Even if a prophecy is fulfilled, it will only tell us that the prophecy maker has some power, ability to make prophecies. This is a very interesting point. Divine omni-traits cannot be inferred. So if Muhammad makes a prophecy about a whole dozen things, you might think, therefore, this is evidence that God has inspired him, but it actually isn't evidence of God. It's evidence of, you don't need to, you can't infer all the extra abilities from that of God, right? It could very well be that Muhammad himself was psychic, let's say. I don't think that's that's realistic, but I'm just saying, because there's nothing in the abilities that he demonstrated. So he knew what happened 2 centuries later. He knew what happened 500 years later. That requires unlimited intelligence. That requires unlimited knowledge. Requires unlimited power. Right? Limited power can do that. So why should we assume that if it is the case that Muhammad was inspired by being, that being itself has divine properties of omniscience, omnibenevolence, because it doesn't tell us whether the being is evil or good, omnipotence, that it was all powerful. Why should we assume this triad of characteristics from that? Right? If David Copperfield makes the Statue of Liberty vanish, we would say he has the power to make the Statue of Liberty vanish. Everything else is extra. We've not seen that. When he shows other stuff, then we might change our views. But until then, all we know, he has the ability to make things vanish.
Right.
Similarly,
Any future prophecy, Mahdin, would be taken as knowledge of the future, basically, a foreknowledge, basically. It could be a mad scientist who has devised some device, maybe in secret, that can take him to, future and bring back. And that's how he knows the future. There are many you can come up with alternatives to it, basically. So divine is not,
yeah.
pointed to it,
So
pretty much. Just
yeah.
by
So
that.
even if all the prophecies, so even if we were wrong about everything we said today, everything we said in the other videos, everything that we've ever said, and all the prophecies are correct, and there's no way to explain it other than appeal to the supernatural. In and of itself, it does not prove the existence of God. Remember, Muslims use this to prove the existence of God, Allah. That God exists because prophecy. God exists because look, he revealed something in the 7th century that was not known before. No. All it means is that this being has knowledge enough, sufficient to reveal something in the 7th century that wasn't known before. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I made loads of arguments about it. In fact, I've made the argument in the context of the scientific prophecy theory, argument that in fact this being may know less than human beings. That's an interesting one. I think I told you, Philo, remember when we did the Ali Dawah stream, I made the argument that this being may actually know less than human beings.
Right.
So the inference to a deity is unsupported. So the next point I'm making is a perfect prophecy fitting the prophecy criteria. So what I'm calling a perfect prophecy is this: it fits those requirements, and if it's all satisfied that it's not mundane, it's clear, it's precise, it can't be brought out through a self-fulfilling feed, and so on, then it might be able to be explained as an extrasensory, a powerful feed, like this Muhammad had this ability. Yes, fine, but even then, what I'm saying is it might be indistinguishable from having a natural explanation, right? Because even then, we need to ask what David Hand has put down as a criteria. What's the probability of that happening by pure luck? By pure luck, due to the law of large numbers and selection effect. So we still need to ask that. That's still another hurdle in the way, right? However, that doesn't mean it's impossible. If the number of prophecies are so specific, precise, and so on, that we add it up cumulatively, and he does it throughout his lifetime to a point where it is akin to, one human being winning 100 lotteries in a week, which may not be able to be explained through the law of large numbers. Remember what I said about how you have to do it. You have to ask, what is the likelihood of one person winning the lottery twice? And can it be still explained through the law of large numbers? At some point, you'll realize you can't. When you keep at it, what about 3 times? What about 4 times? What about 5 times? At some point, mathematically, the law of large numbers won't be able to explain it. There's not going to be enough time. There's not going to be enough people, right? And at that point, you will say, all right, we need to defer to a different explanation. And the same applies here. If there are so many difficult prophecies that fit the Aaron Fezer criteria, we call it Fezer's criteria right now, yeah, and it's so many that it exceeds the ability for the law of large numbers or the law of selection to explain it, then yes, now we have to think about an alternative explanation. And it opens the door for a potential supernatural explanation, right? I wrote here at the bottom a paradigmatic example of a perfect prophecy. I just want to explain, give an example, because somebody might say, okay, Mahdin, okay, Khayalie, okay, Philo, you're talking about all of this. What would a perfect prophecy look like that fulfills the entire criteria? And I think personally, a God would have done this had God created it. A perfect prophecy, I thought about this very quickly. I might be wrong about this. So you guys can help correct or sharpen this example. I think something like this, right? A perfect prophecy is a prophecy of the asteroid. An asteroid will hit Earth on January the 25th at 3:30 p.m. in location X, and let's say we are very specific with the coordinates, in somewhere in Africa. I think that is, it can't be explained. It fits all of the 5 criteria or the 6 criteria it's very precise. It's almost mathematically precise. Yeah. There's a time date, it's time bound. There's one specific event that we're looking for, right? And finally, it's not self-fulfilling. A human can't bring it up by chance, because it's going to be harder for humans to knock an asteroid. Very unlikely, I'd say. I don't know whether it's impossible, but to cause an asteroid to fall on that specific date is going to be very hard, I would at least imagine. Especially in the past. I think progressively going into the future, it may become easier to throw an asteroid into the Earth. But especially in the past, if this prophecy of the asteroid was made in the last 200 years, this would be highly unlikely, I would think, that a human can bring an asteroid out from space and drop it into Africa in that exact location, in that exact time. And that would be a perfect prophecy. And guess what? If the Quran was filled with many of them, it might exceed David Hand's improbability principle. And I'd be like, wow, we need to defer to the supernatural now. Yeah, what do you think?
Right. I think this example that you gave, if it were to happen in probably like say 1400 years back or so, you would have said, you could have still said that, oh, probably this guy has got some capability to look into the space or whatever the heavens are. Pretty much now you can do that with a telescope probably, and he has got some real good hand on mathematics and trajectory detection and all those things. And still, in my eyes, still a naturalistic explanation would be more probable than, at least that's my take, by the way.
I mean, given the current understanding that we have, and all the variables that are involved in any asteroid falling at a specific point on Earth, I think it would be. It would be a valid prophecy which I think, given uh, that there are a few more than there should be at least a few of them. And I think at least and if there are a few of them, very specific prophecies which tell us the time and exact point where they are going to fall, I think I it would cause me to, maybe believe that, yeah, this is something supernatural, because given the human understanding that we have. But again, as Mahdin mentioned, it would make me think that it is something supernatural, not
So you're
necessarily
saying
God.
supernatural, or I'm just confused. Are
Not
you
God.
saying supernatural or something that someone who knows future? Because I think those are two. I'm
uh
not quite sure
okay,
because I
so
don't want those to be
okay,
conflict.
you could
Like
say
somebody
something
who knows
beyond human
future.
capacity. Something
Yes,
beyond human
yes,
capacity,
yes.
I
Human
think.
capacity,
Yeah,
beyond
that's
human.
probably a
Yeah.
better term. Yeah, yeah.
I'm using the word supernatural very, very broadly over here.
Broadly, yeah. I understand. It just makes it easier for the lay audience as well, to
Yeah,
talk in
yeah.
this manner.
Right.
But we can. I don't want to further complicate definitions right now with supernatural.
Exactly.
But I think this is good enough. I mean, if it's not good enough, we can strengthen it. I'm not committed to this example. We can think of many different scenarios that would be so difficult for human effort that you would say, okay, something else is going on, right? Um, and many of them. So maybe one of these events like this possibly can come through the law of large numbers, possibly because many people are making loads of end of the earth dystopia type predictions, like people are going to die in 2012. This is going to happen. So what is the relevant data again? Well, David Han would ask, what's the relevant data or consideration we make when we examine whether this particular prophecy, this particular statement was unlikely to have come about or not come, or has been likely to come about through the law of large numbers. And we're asking, and we can be very general about this. We can ask, what is the likelihood of not just Brian predicting that the asteroid will hit this particular location, but anybody predicting an asteroid would hit this particular location. Then even broader, what is the likelihood what is the likelihood of anybody predicting an asteroid hitting any location? Then even broader, what is the likelihood of any celestial object hitting any location? And then even broader, what is the likelihood of any weird, strange event? See, now it's so broad that it could be anything. It doesn't have to be an asteroid hitting the Earth. It could just be a giant worm climbing out of the Earth's crust. It could be meaning that there's so many weird stories and fantasies that people are saying. So we don't need to limit our data set or sample to asteroid type prophecies. We can go beyond that to anything, almost anything that is remarkable. And guess what? People are doing that all the time. People are writing many fantastical fictions, and there's many millions of people who are just deluded and fanatical and saying deluded and fanatical things. Now, what is the chance of it, just one of them being correct about something at some point? It actually might be very high, in which case, even the asteroid prophecy may be very high, right? To get it right just by chance because of the law of large numbers. But then we need to ask, what about if this one person did it twice, then did it 3 times, and at some point it will exceed, I submit, the law of really large numbers. What all of this shows is that the natural explanation is very strong because the law of large numbers in itself, because the world is so big and there's so much time and there's so many things happening, people speaking, talking about so many things, that in fact that is a powerful source to explain a lot of stuff. Yeah. In fact, David Hunt says what he's talking about, the law of selection and law of large numbers, is actually the fundamental drivers of reality. Fine-tuning explains the fine-tuning problem. It explains how we got here. It explains evolution. These are the drivers of it's like if I could speak colloquially, you'd almost say it's like a fundamental law of reality. Yeah.
It's ubiquitous.
Yes.
Ubiquitous, you can say, pretty much, in a
Yes.
sense. All right.
Yeah.
Khayalie, you had something to add to it. Mahdin, are you done? Shall we move on?
I mean, the
You want
last
to
thing
add
that
anything else?
the
Yeah.
last bullet point. I mean, I said the mere existence of imperfect prophecies is evidence in and of itself of naturalism, right? So this is I'm going to be 1 minute for this. So if Prophet Muhammad's prophecies are most of the time not hitting the criteria, the 6 criteria, sorry, then we need to ask this. If a God wrote prophecy, would it be like the ones that are found and revealed in the scripture? Or would it be more closer to the asteroid, the prophecy of the asteroid, the perfect prophecy? Why would there be so many imperfect? Remember what I mean by imperfect? Not hitting the 5 criteria, the 6 criteria, sorry. Yeah, not meeting that standard. Would God create imperfect prophecies that can always be susceptible to a natural explanation? Or would he try and create the perfect proper prophecy that would defeat natural explanation, that will defeat the improbability principle, David Hand's principles? Well, God would do that, right? God would create improper, very, very, very specific prophecies, very, very, very hard to achieve prophecies, and many of them, and he'll be very clear about it, and he'll be close to the asteroid example. But if man wrote the Quran, it won't be like that. So the fact that Muhammad's prophecies are so imperfect is actually evidence for that it's man-made. It's that naturalism explains it, not supernaturalism. Yeah, but yeah, that's it. I submit my case. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Great.
just to highlight, I mean,
Yeah.
to avoid any confusion, the word imperfect prophecy has been used in regards with the criteria that Mahdin has just described in this entire stream. It's not an incorrect prophecy; it is an imperfect prophecy, meaning that it does not fulfill the criteria that we have discussed above.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Agreed. I think, yeah.
And we're moving on from imperfect prophecies to incorrect prophecies. Do you think, Philo, we have time for this, or do you want? I think we can quickly go through them. I think they're just 4 slides that we have. Can you zoom in a bit? I mean, probably so people can see. So this is Quran
I think
843.
you'll have to zoom in from because you're
Okay.
posing it, right? Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So let's see if I can. Can I? How would I do that?
Control plus, do control plus.
Okay. Control. I'm not sure. Uh, this is.
You can't do control plus, maybe.
Can I?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I
Let
do
me see.
on my machine. I use something similar, basically.
So, can you guys actually read this, or is it something that it's a
Let me
bit too
see if I
small?
can do something from my full
Yeah,
screen. Hold on. Can I just try this? Is it better?
yeah, you can try this. It's a bit better, but if you can try this, can you try to zoom in as well, or you can't?
No, I can't. I don't think I have that. Uh, no, I can't do that. I can't zoom it in. That's that's the limit of it, probably. I think
Give me
I
one. Give
can.
me one
Okay,
minute, guys. I'll be back. Okay.
sure, sure.
I have the control to move on to the slides basically, but
Okay. So yeah, we're gonna quickly go through a few prophecies which are apparently at least incorrect, and I think if you actually go through the wordings and see what the wording they're actually saying, it's quite clear that these prophecies did not actually turn out to be true. But either Muslims or Prophet himself tried to make up excuses about why they did not come true. So this is something from Quran. This is chapter 8 verse 43, and this is about when a prophet saw in a dream that they were going, since they were going in a battle. Prophet saw in a dream that the size of the army that they are going to fight against is going to be quite small in size. And but however, it turned out that this prophecy that the army that they actually fought was quite large in size. I mean, way more than expected. And or way more than what he saw. So, in the Islamic perspective, what you have to understand is that for a prophet, a dream is a revelation. It's considered considered a revelation from God. And even if you read the wording of the Quranic verse, it is clear that Allah wanted to communicate something. So if you read the verse, remember, O Prophet, when Allah showed them in your dream as few in number. What it means is that by them it means the opponent's army. So Allah showed them, as in the opponent's army, in your dream as few in numbers. Had He shown them to you as many, you believers would have certainly faltered and disputed in the matter. But Allah spared you from that. Surely He knows the best what is hidden in your heart. So the excuse that so what happened is, as I mentioned, is that they were going in a battle, and Prophet saw in a dream, and he mentioned that, and it is all apparent from this verse, that he saw that in his dream, that the size of the army of his opponent was very small. But when they actually went into the army, went into the battle, the size wasn't that small. He had mentioned that to his companions. It's not that this was only something that he saw and kept it to himself. He actually mentioned that to his companions. How do we know that? Because if you read the verse, it says, had he shown them to use as many, you believers would have certainly faltered and disputed in the matter. What that means is, if Allah had shown the prophet that there were many, the opponent's army was very large, prophet's companion would have faltered, and they would have sort of become fearful, and maybe even have become a bit concerned, and might be fearful of and might not even go into battle. So in order to spare them from that fear, and not giving them the strength to actually go into the battle, in order to not scare them away, that is the reason that the prophet is giving, that why Allah's vision or Allah's communication to the prophet was incorrect. Now imagine that you're sitting in that time, and prophet is telling you, well, tomorrow we are going into battle, and I've seen, Allah has told me that the size of the opponent's army, our opponent's army is very small. The companions become very happy, but when it turns out that the size is not that small, companions would say that, well, prophet, you said that the size is not is very small, but it is a very large army. And your prophecy, because it is a prophecy in a way, why didn't it actually turn out to be true? And the prophet actually makes up an excuse for that, actually, it turned out to be incorrect because Allah didn't want you to be it didn't want you to be fearful, and he actually wanted you to go into the battle. Otherwise you would not have actually even gone into the battle, because of the fact that you would have been very scared. So this actually is, I think, it's a good proof that this was a prophecy which and ended up being wrong. It's just that prophet made up an excuse for that. And if this had
I think
happened,
I
Muslims
think
should think about it. Yes.
somebody could say, a Muslim can say, oh, wow, you see, Allah protected his prophet, pretty
Yeah,
much,
yeah.
or you can look at it
Yeah,
both ways, pretty much, right?
exactly. But I'll tell you what. No, no, no.
Yeah,
And this is where I'm going to go next. What I'm telling you is,
yeah,
just imagine. So Muslims are going to look at it in this way, but just imagine that this was not your prophet. This was another person claiming to be a prophet, and this has happened with him and his companions. And when if Muslims had come to know about what something like this happened, they would have immediately dismissed that, this is a proof that that person who is claiming to
yeah.
be a
For the
prophet
people who are
is
not believer at that time, yeah, for sure, right?
exactly. And that is what
I
they have to
agree.
understand, that no,
Right,
for the people who don't believe in that person, it is very obvious that that person made an incorrect prophecy, and later on he tried to make an
right. I
excuse
mean,
to just make up that, why his prophecy turned out to be wrong. So this
right,
is something that Muslims should look at neutrally, and try to understand that if this had happened with a person who claims to be a prophet, but who
yeah,
was not Prophet Muhammad, Muslims would have jumped up immediately and claimed that, no, no, you see,
yeah. You have
your
to
prophecy turned
imagine
out to
being
be
in
wrong.
that place at that time and just
Exactly,
listening to this
exactly,
prophecy. And
and
now
it
would
would
you
be
believe
crystal clear.
that
Exactly.
prophet?
Mm.
Basically, that's
Now
that's
would
the
you,
question.
yeah, now would you accept that as an excuse that that their God actually lied, because in that case your God is lying. So
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So that is one prophecy number one. So this is the prophecy number two. It's a bit you could make up a few excuses for that, but I'd still want to discuss this. So this is Quran chapter 48 verse 29. I've There's incorrect heading. This is not the Quran 8:43. It is chapter 48 verse 29. And in this
Mm,
verse, it is said that Muhammad is a messenger of Allah, and those with him are firm with the believers, with the disbelievers, and compassionate with one another. Now, this statement that the Prophet's companions are compassionate with one another. Now, that statement, I think, turned out to be incorrect because his companions fought wars amongst themselves. So, claiming that they
exactly.
were compassionate amongst themselves, well, I think they were actually firm with themselves, and I think it's quite obvious that they were as firm, at least, as they were firm with the disbelievers. So did this turn out to be true? I don't think so. So I think
I think this could be,
yeah,
Kali, could this be, sorry for
yes,
interrupting you. Could
yes,
this be, instead of taken as a prophecy, could you say just it's a contradiction in a sense, in a statement rather than a prophecy?
you see, then we'll have to discuss what a prophecy means, right? So in a
Right. No,
way,
no,
it is about
just taking it.
it's
I
both.
mean,
It's
it's still
both.
incorrect information. It's still incorrect information
Exactly.
rather than, yeah, it's
Exactly.
still
It's
incorrect
both, right?
information.
It's inconsistent because it was at the same time it's wrong, but it's
Yeah.
we are considering at the
But the
same time
events are
because
taking place in future, right?
exactly you have to look at
That's
it from the
possible.
perspective. You have to look at it from the perspective that when Prophet said it and when it actually happened. So
Right.
Prophet said this
I
during his
agree. I mean,
lifetime,
yeah,
and just
yeah.
immediately after his lifetime, this happened.
Yeah, it's a very
So yeah,
thin line between those two, maybe.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Okay, so the next one, we don't have to spend too much time on this one, but the next one. Okay, so this is a hadith from Sahih Bukhari which says that when Khusro perishes, there will be no more Khusro after him, and when Caesar perishes, there will be no more Caesar after him. Prophet also said, "You will spend the treasures, both of them, in Allah's cause." Now, you see, this in this case, well, it turned out that the Khusro that Prophet mentioned during the Khusro is the was the king of Persia at the time. That was the title of the Persian king, Khusro. So Prophet is saying that the Khusro who's there right now, there will be no Khusro after this one, and there with the Caesar who's there during the lifetime of Prophet will be the last one, and there will be no more Caesar after him. Caesar, it's called Caesar. Am I pronouncing it right, or is it Caesar? Right, Caesar.
Julius Caesar, yeah. Caesar,
Julius Caesar, right? Caesar.
right.
So Prophet is claiming that there would be no Caesar after the Caesar who's right there during the lifetime of the Prophet. But if you notice, the last Caesar actually turned out to be the one after the Prophet's life, after Prophet had died, who was Constance II. He actually was born in 630, which was just near the death of the Prophet. And he died in 668. He became the Caesar in the year 641 after the death of his grandfather. So in this case, Prophet is saying that there will be no Caesar after this one. However, it turned out that there was a Caesar after this one. His prophecy turned out to be correct in terms of Khusro, but it turned out to be wrong, clearly wrong, in terms of about when it comes about Caesar, right? So this is also a clearly incorrect prophecy. And what Muslims should also consider is majority of the prophecies that Muslims often quote, by the Prophet to be coming from the Prophet, they are not time bound. But the prophecies, I'm not aware of many time bound prophecies which are time bound or which specify a specific time. This one is a time bound a time bound prophecy because it mentioned this that this person is going to die and there will be no one who will have this title after him. So it was in a way time bound because once the Caesar dies, that time ends. It doesn't have to be specific year, but it was when the Caesar dies, in whatever manner. So this when the prophecy turned out to be time bound, well, immediately we can see some problems, right? So there are not many time bound prophecies that Muslims can give an example of, and I don't think of uh, any time bound prophecy which exists. Maybe there are few, but I don't. Maybe some of them actually are there, which relates to the period before the hadiths were documented. Of course, like the Khilafat will be of 30 years and all that. But again, the same problem applies to that. So given there are such prophecies which turned out to be wrong, I think Muslims should seriously consider that. Is it actually the case that all of the prophecies that Prophet you know actually gave were true or turned out to be true? Of course, Muslims make up all these excuses. They are aware of this case, and they make an excuse that, well, he didn't mean he. Sorry, Mahdin, do you want to say something?
Mahdin back
Mike,
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
feedback.
no, I
Mike,
didn't want to say
Mike.
anything, but I was thinking of saying in this situation that that would be really good if there was time-bound prophecies, right? If there was one after another time-bound prophecies, and you couldn't appeal to the fact
Right.
that it was a self-fulfilled prophecy. That's getting close to the
Right,
perfect, multiple number of perfect prophecies that I talked about. And by perfect prophecy, I just
exactly.
mean that it fits the criterion. But imagine that. Imagine if lots of like that existed, real time-bound prophecies, and not something that you could easily predict, very clear. You don't have to achieve it through, not something that you can really achieve through human effort, or it's very unlikely to be achieved through human effort. And it's set
Exactly.
throughout history. Like in this date, this will happen. In this date, that will happen. And yeah, that could be very very rare. It'll be definitely very different from any other astrologer or psychic. You know, because they don't really get it that right. And even if it doesn't fit the probability thing that I talked about, it might not exceed the improbability principle, because David Hand would say, based on the size of the earth, it might not be impossible that at least one culture may have just got it right multiple times. So I don't know, and that might be mathematically correct. Remember, we're not arbitrarily making these things up. We're saying statistically, it forces
Right.
us to think this way. But I would still be very surprised if that happened. I would that improbability principle concept will not, even though that's the rational conclusion that it can still be explained through large probabilities, large numbers. Sorry, I would still be baffled. But the fact that it's not like that, there's no time-bound prophecies of very, very little. And whenever it does try to do it, it gets it, gets it wrong. Not just an imperfect prophecy, but an incorrect prophecy. That tells me then again what I said in my conclusion, which is when you have these flaws, is it more likely to be explained through naturalism versus God? God could have just designed it all differently, but he didn't. So this seems to be a human product.
I
Yeah,
agree. I agree.
agreed. There are quite a few other prophecies that whenever you have a conversation with somebody who's propagating Islam, or your Muslim friends and all those people, or even on internet, you come across somebody whom you are having a chat with, and those the fingernail, not what it is, fingertip prophecy, the fingertip mark, fingerprints, basically. Yes, fingerprint prophecy, that their skins will bear witness against them. Yeah, those
I
kind
don't
of.
associate, or you're referring to scientific prophecies now then, because in a way
Yeah, scientific prophecy,
it's
right? Scientific
more, yeah,
prophecy,
it's more
that is
about,
right. It is scientific prophecy, right? Though
in a way.
quite a few of scientific prophecies you get to hear, right? Pretty much,
Yes,
not the general prophecies, by the way.
right, right.
Right. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to finally bring one. See, most of a large part of the prophecies are eschatology based, pretty much, right? And there is this one hadith, I think.
Should
I
I
think
should
it's.
I f- should I first move to the last one that I have? I have one more.
I thought you were done. Sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, no.
Go
I
ahead.
have I have I have one more. So just I'm
Okay.
gonna
Okay. Yeah.
present
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and then
Sure.
we can move.
Sure.
So this one is the last one, which is about, and I think this would relate to, then you can very smoothly, move over to yours as well. Maybe you were referring to this one. So eschatology. I mean, and this is about world's end. So this is a hadith from Sahih Muslim. Again, I have given a wrong heading. Made this slide in a bit hurry. So it's from Sahih Muslim. And it says Aisha reported that when the desert Arabs came to Allah's messenger, they asked about the last hour as to when that would come. And he looked towards the youngest amongst them and said, if he lived, he would not grow very old that he would find your last hour coming to you. Now that what is in bracket, that he would see you dying. Now that is not what the prophet was saying, right? There was a very specific question that was asked to the prophet: when will the last hour happen? And the prophet said, well, there's a young guy over here. He will not grow old before, he and you know and then you'll find that the last hour has already arrived. So this clearly did not happen. Now Muslims make up, once again, they make up excuses for about this, that actually what it meant is the last hour for all these people is when they die. So when people die, that is the last hour for them. Well, is that the question that was person was asking? Was that person asking that when will I die, or when will my last hour be? I think that's a ridiculous way to answer that question, and I think it's very obvious that that is not what he meant. Even even there are a few. I don't have that link over here. There are clarifications under in the bracket. It is said that, oh, it does not mean as it was commonly understood that that this is referring to the last hour, meaning the very exactly the truly last hour. Rather, it means the that person's own death.
No,
What
Mahathir,
that means is that,
sorry, Kali, there is another problem. The
right?
I don't know where the titles of the chapters came from, but if those are to
Uh,
be trusted, the approach of the hour
yeah,
cannot have
exactly,
some individual's dying hour or time.
exactly. It would be a
Right?
meaningless answer, right?
It will be a
You
meaningless less answer. So
Yeah, yeah,
you can make
you,
all the jalebis you want, but you'll have to eat
exactly.
them finally, right? All of them, pretty much. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's obvious that some of the explanations under similar hadiths, it clearly mentioned that people thought that it meant that actual a last hour will be there before that child grows old. But it turned out that no, this didn't happen. So then Muslims actually made up another explanation that, oh no, actually what it might have meant is that the people are going to die, and the person's death means the last hour for them. So once again, Muslims are going to make jalebis to explain this, but it's obvious that this is not what he meant. He clearly meant the question that was asked from him. He answered that question. If he was trying to answer what you were actually imposing onto that, or what you're projecting onto this hadith, then I think he knew what how to describe those that in simple Arabic, right? That your last hour will be when you die. That's all you should be concerned with. He did not say that. He gave a very elaborate example of a child, saying that, well, this child will not grow
No,
old before.
that's
Yeah,
even senseless answer, pretty much, right?
exactly, exactly. But I'll tell you, if someone tries to I probably Muslims will, if they actually see this, and if they comment on this, I know this is how they'll respond to this, because this is what their standard response is to these hadiths, to this particular case. And there are several hadith. This is not just one turk. This is not from a single chain of narration which people could actually just dismiss by saying that, oh, this is not a sahih hadith. This is number one, this is a sahih hadith, and this is from multiple chain of narrations, so they cannot dismiss it that easily.
Right, right, right.
Okay, so that's all from my side. Yes, fire away.
All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add something that we have already talked about a lot, and yeah, we have already talked about this hadith. We have beaten it too, pretty much. I'm still gonna share it. Can you guys see it? And
Yes, I can see it. It's a bit small, but yes, you
and
can
it,
zoom it, right?
okay, I'm gonna zoom it in. All right, let me see how it's looking out there. And okay, so it's from
Yeah.
Sunan Ibn Majah, right? 63. And Darussalam has graded it Sahih, right? But, there are disputes over it. But in any case, so this is the prophecy that talks about those. You see the highlighted points is what we have
Yes.
been talking about. And there might
Yes.
be multiple narrations about this in other hadiths as well, but
Uh,
this is the one
there
that
are. We've
Yeah.
shown them in the previous video we made on prophecies, right? When we were
Right.
responding
Right.
to Muhammad Hijab.
Right. 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 So you see here it's written shepherds over here competing in constructing tall buildings basically, and this is what they talk about. One of the problems, one of the things that the question, and this objection was raised by Hassan Radwan in his Medium page, where he says why prophecies don't work basically, and he brought in another hadith where. Uh, so I'm going to present another one. Right. So here, what they could have done if they were the descendants of these, Bedouin, whatever Bedouins, right? Desert dwelling shepherds or Bedouins, whatever you want to call it, which was what implied by Muhammad Hijab for, UAE or
Hello.
Dubai building the tallest building.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Let me just. I'll be back in about 10-15 minutes. You just long, yeah?
Sure, sure.
Is that okay?
We might close in
All right.
probably
You
in
might
10
close
minutes.
in, yeah, before that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll still be back. If I'm not back, then bye from me for now. I just
All right.
it's just been too long. It's almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
I just
All
He
right.
said it's almost been three
yeah.
hours. Yeah.
It's almost been 3 hours, right? All right,
If you're
Madam.
on in 15 minutes, I'll back and then bye from me for now. Yeah.
All right, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Uh,
All right.
All right. So let me bring that these. All right. I think here it is. Can you see what it is?
Zoom
I
in.
need to I need to zoom it in. So the only point I'm trying to make is if they were to, say that this is the prophecy that's come true, tallest buildings and all those, then why couldn't they add a simple word offsprings of those people from the nomadic tribes, right? When
Exactly.
there is a
If
there is another hadith which clearly mentions those things, right? So these are smaller discrepancies that you find, and you can see that those things are not precise, prophecies basically, and really, really
exactly,
vague. So yeah. In any case, I
exactly. I
think
mean, there is no
let's.
reason. Yeah. Yeah. There is no reason to not include that if that is what was meant. If it meant to say that it was the children of these Bedouins, then I mean, it could have said that simply, but it did not.
Right. At
Making
least
it
the
more
prophecy would have become a little bit more precise, right? You
specific.
you still
Exactly.
would have needed a few more criteria to be met from the 6 point criteria that we have listed in there. But
Exactly.
at least it would have, would have been one step closer to being a decent prophecy, at least, right? All
Yeah.
right. I think,
Totally agree.
Kelly, we've covered a huge ground today. I think it's a
Yeah.
very, very long stream after a long time. So I think we should close it in today. Oh, we want to put in some
Yep.
last remarks before we close it.
No, no, I
Closing
think
remarks.
we have said a lot today. So yeah,
All
no,
right.
no more
So
closing
all I'm
remarks. I
gonna.
think Muslims should consider listening to this and just understand the criteria that we have mentioned, and that I think all of that stems from the primary, uh, you could say, motto that one should have when they are analyzing any sort of prophecies, which is we can only attribute supernatural causes to any prophecy or statement once we have already exhausted all of the possible naturalistic explanations that could possibly be there for that prophecy. So we should not jump on to a supernatural natural cause until we have exhausted all the possible natural causes for that prophecy or for that statement. So
Right.
that is
And what? Yeah.
the
Yeah.
primary
Yeah.
motto under which you should see all of those criteria, because this is just
Right.
what our common sense tells us, right? We shouldn't just immediately conclude that something happened because of a supernatural reason. We assume that it happened because of a natural reason unless there is very strong evidence that no, there is no possible natural reason or cause for this to happen. Then only we could go on considering, or we can consider that, okay, maybe there is something supernatural going on. Otherwise, we shouldn't even
Yeah.
consider a supernatural source.
Right. And one more thing, from a very Islamic prophecies perspective, Khali, and probably this is going to take another minute, maybe, or maybe even less, is that we are talking about these prophecies that are written right now. We showed a couple of prophecies that are being gloated by people like Muhammad Hijab and others, basically, right? And these are coming from hadith literature, pretty much, right? And problem is, this literature has been written after, and it's there is a scholarly consensus on this, that they were written probably 200 to 250 years after the events that they describe, basically. So if something is written so late, and they are talking about prophecies, though those were made probably 250 years earlier, it becomes exceedingly difficult to trust those sources, pretty much, in terms of at least those prophecies, basically, whether those prophecies
Right.
were kind of in a sense written later, or they were really prophesied at the time that they are asserted to have been, or at least claimed to have been prophesied at the time, basically.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
those are a couple of at
That's
least problems that we all see here, right?
And I
Khali,
think
so
just to, sorry, can you hear me?
sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll just also, since you just mentioned that, I'll add to that another point, or another point that Muslims should actually consider. You see, Muslims find it very difficult to understand that why are we so skeptical when it comes to hadith being reliable, or maybe these hadith tellers were actually lying, or they were fabricating hadith. Muslims should think about it. Number one, there were actually people who were fabricating hadiths. There, in fact, many of the hadiths, in fact, there are people who say that majority of the hadith literature was fabricated, was
In
full of lies.
Sahih Bukhari's preface, I
Yes,
think he writes that 98% of the hadith he had to reject because
reject.
he
No,
couldn't
for
trust the
whatever reason, yeah, he couldn't trust.
yeah, whatever the
Yeah.
reasons were, basically.
People say it was because it was just the same hadith with different chain of narrations. He remembered all those different chain of narrations, and he had only mentioned 7,000 out of all of those. But there is no proof of that. They just say that so that it doesn't sort of disprove or discredit their entire corpus of hadith. But there are people who were there at the time who it was obvious that people were fabricating hadiths. So it is obvious that there were actually people who were fabricating hadiths. Now, what Muslims now find it difficult to understand, once again, and something, another point that they find difficult to digest, is that people who were considered sikha could also have been lying, or could have been fabricators, or could have been munafiqeen, if nothing else. You see, Muslim, you might not be able to identify a munafiq, right? Munafiq is someone who hides his faith, or hides his main motivation or intentions. What if there were people within Muslims who were munafiqeen, who at the time of
There were
tabi'in and tabi'in, they were, right? So
there were
the Muslim,
munafiqeens because Abu Bakr,
exactly,
the Battle of Yamama, was one of those battles where a lot of munafiqeens had left the
exactly,
religion, basically, right? So I mean, you can't
exactly.
discount those cases, pretty much, right?
Let's count those guys.
I mean, it's all
Exactly,
in your books. It's not that something we are coming up with, basically. This is all part of your history. You have to,
exactly,
if you believe in that, you have to believe these parts as well, pretty much, right? At least
exactly.
trust them that though there was munafiqeens in numbers,
When they say that it is, I mean, the kind of reliance that they put on ilmu rijal, well, can those people who were actually, compiling all this work on ilmu rijal, did they have any means or supernatural way to uh, identify who were the munafiqeen at the time of tabi'in or tabi'in, or the time of hadith compilation? What if they were true fabricators, who were hidden as some pious people, right? There can be people like that who we can misjudge a character, right? We can misjudge people. So why couldn't the people who were these scholars of ilmu rijal, how could they not be wrong? Now, Let me tell you an additional point. Maybe it's a food for thought for Muslims. Now, just like you can't find yourself, you cannot make yourself even consider the fact that your early scholars were not pious people, were not true believers, were not very pious, or they could fabricate something towards their religion. Similarly, Christians have same beliefs about their early scholars. However, you Muslims
Exactly.
believe that they actually fabricated all those things. Jews have the same belief about their early scholars that they could not have fabricated, or they could not have even, murdered Jesus, who was the true Messiah, despite knowing that he was the Messiah. Although Muslims believe all of that, that the Jew scholars, they knew that he was Jesus, and yet they murdered the prophets, right? So just like
Yeah.
you can so what you have to understand is, just like there were people, there were scholars who were lying for their own benefit, who used to do horrific things like even murdering people, like prophets, according to your religion, according to your Quran, they used to kill prophets, right, despite even knowing that they were prophets. Similar could be the case. Why don't you apply similar skepticism to your own scholars? Maybe
Similar
many of
standard.
your own
Yeah.
scholars, exactly, maybe
Right.
many of your own scholars were not that pious. Maybe they were just pretending to be pious. They were just
One more
pious
example.
because it was something. Yeah. So I mean, just I'm just giving them food for thought, because
Right.
they
Right.
should understand. They
One
cannot
more
even
example for.
imagine. Yeah. Yes. 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 Follow.
Sure, sure. Just one more example of a munafiq that comes to my mind is not something that they would think through it, and it comes from the hadith literature again. This guy is the cousin of Osman, right? Abdullah ibn Saad ibn Abisar, basically, right? You remember the guy who said, "Okay, should I add this as well?" So you never know how long he was a munafiq for. Basically, he was a katibin, basically, right? He was a katib, basically, right? He was
Mm,
among one of the
exactly.
katibin, pretty much, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there were all these people in there, and so this, yeah, uh, they all these
I mean,
things, you never know. Okay,
yes.
yeah, please go ahead.
And I
Tell me.
mean, there were people. So just to further give you an example, give Muslims an example to understand how difficult is it, even according to your own religion, to understand or identify a person's intention, or about how pious they actually were. So there was a person who died fighting during the time of Prophet, and the Muslims around at the time, they sort of said that, they expressed their awe about that person, that that person is now in Jannah, he's a shaheed, he died in the way of Allah, and all that. They were praising him, right? And Prophet said, well, actually no, he's not in Jannah. The Prophet, people like, why is he? Well, you see, he said that he did not die because he did not die for Allah. He died for his own tribe, for his own fame, for his own status. His motivation was not for Allah. So that is not the case. So now, similarly, if people can misjudge a person's intentions, a person who's actually dying in a battle fighting alongside Prophet, if such a person is someone that you cannot actually attribute piety to, or maybe you cannot be sure about that person's piety, whose piety can you be sure of? I think nobody's. So I think this is just
Exactly,
another example that
exactly.
Muslims should consider, that you should be you there is
I
there
think
is reason to be there is
Kali,
reason to be skeptical about your scholars.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, Kali. What I'm thinking is, because we brought two very big examples, we should have a reference if we have, maybe what we'll
Yeah,
do
yeah.
is we'll add the
Will, yeah,
reference later on to this
later
incident.
on, yes.
Yeah,
Exactly. We
and
will do that.
underneath our, so
Maybe in the
guys, if
comment
you're,
section or in the
yeah, in the
description. Yeah.
comment section or maybe in the description section, we'll add this. And if
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
maybe you
We
can
will do
write
that.
to us and ask us, anybody who's.
Exactly. Okay, so I
Anything
think
more
that's
to
all
add
for
or?
today. No, no, no,
All right.
nothing else.
All right. All right. So, everybody who's listening or who's going to listen to it, please like, subscribe and share as much as you can. Basically, if I think this is a this one was a Khayalie, this one was a very very different stream, because this is something we've really
Yeah.
wanted to bring this criteria, because I don't think not too many people have put in such a robust criteria for judging prophecies, basically, at
Yeah.
least ascertaining the
Exactly.
truthfulness of prophecies. So this stream should be there as a beacon for something for everybody to judge. Maybe I hope lots and lots of people do listen to it and understand what this criteria is all about, and then judge their prophecies, their scriptural prophecies based on it, whether they be Jews, Christians, or Hindus, whoever they might be, Muslims, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a fun stream. I think we have a few comments. Shall I take them up? I don't know. Munafiqat is not
Yeah.
against
Sure. Sure.
Islam. Yeah, Muhammad Asim is saying
I'm
that.
not sure.
Okay,
I'm not sure what he means by that.
bhai,
Munafiq
bhai,
is
I don't understand what you
Munafiq is
mean.
the worst. Munafiq is the worst. He's even worse than a kafir. So if
Yeah,
a kafir is
it's
against
worse than.
Islam, then I'm not sure how. In fact, Munafiq would be a kafir might not be against Islam. He might just not believe in Islam. But a Munafiq is someone who's pretending to be a Muslim, and his what would be his intention to pretend to be a Muslim, according to you, just to harm Muslims or harm Islam at least, right? So I'm not sure what you mean that Munafiq is not against Islam. Doesn't make sense at all.
Right, right. All right. There's a message from Saurabh Raj.
Yeah.
He says you guys are great. Thanks, Saurabh. Yes, I appreciate you willing to spread the word. So thank you very much. And we'll share as much as possible. Keep going. Thanks, Saurabh. All right, guys. So time to say adieu. Thanks, Khayalie. This was a good stream.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks,
See you guys
Faisal.
later. See you everybody. Yeah. See you everybody later.
Yeah.
Next time, next stream. Bye bye.